My name is Teresa Chapman, and I'm about to tell you about the worst phone call a mother can ever receive. Mrs. Chapman, this is Detective Davis with the Sheriff's Office. I need you to come down to the station. It's about your sons. I drove there thinking maybe they'd gotten into a fight. Maybe some kid had bullied Eric again. Maybe Tyler had gotten in trouble with his parole. But when I walked into that station and saw the detective's face, I knew. Something had shattered. Something I could never put back together. Your boys have been in a shooting. 4 words that ended my life as I knew it. Let me take you back to that Sunday morning, December 28th, 2024. A morning that started like any other in our remote home near Almeda, New Mexico. Tyler and Eric were in the living room, doing what they always did. Watching gun content creators, playing video games, just being brothers. I was there with them that morning. I can tell you exactly what time I left. What I didn't know was that a young woman named Sarah Collins was there too. A girl Tyler had met 3 weeks earlier in rehab. A girl who would turn my sons into killers before the day was over. Here is what I've pieced together from police reports, interrogation tapes, and my son's broken confessions. Sarah had been dating a man named Walter Jackson, 37 years old, father of 2. And according to Sarah, he had been abusive, controlling, dangerous. I don't know if that was true. I'll never know. What I do know is that at some point that morning, Sarah's phone buzzed. She looked at Tyler and Eric and she said something that changed everything. "We're going for a ride. Bring the guns." My boys, 19 and 23 years old, grabbed their rifles and followed her out the door. Tyler, my oldest, the one who had struggled with addiction but was trying so hard to stay clean. Eric, my baby, the one who had been bullied his whole life, who learned about guns from video tutorials, who just wanted to protect his brother. They didn't know where they were going. That's what they told police later, and I believed them. Sarah told them she needed to check on her car at a storage unit near Walter's house. Just a quick stop, nothing dangerous. But when they pulled up to that trailer park, Walter came out, and everything went to hell. 4 gunshots shattered the Sunday morning quiet. Witnesses saw a man collapse in a pool of blood. They saw a white vehicle speed away, and they called 911. What they didn't see was what happened inside that vehicle. 2 terrified boys realizing they had just committed murder. Sarah sitting in the back seat with 0 emotion on her face. That's what Tyler told detectives later. She had no reaction. It was shocking. By the time I got that phone call from Detective Davis, my sons were already in custody. The tactical team had surrounded our house, found the guns they had left behind, and arrested them as they tried to come home. When I arrived at the station, Eric asked to have me present during his interrogation. He is severely dyslexic, struggles with authority figures, and he's always been my gentle boy, despite everything. The detective allowed it, probably thinking I'd help them get a confession. He was right. I sat there and watched my 19-year-old son describe how he pulled the trigger, how Walter had come at Tyler with a phone in his hand. Tyler thought it was a gun. How they struggled, fell to the ground, and the revolver Tyler was holding dropped into the dirt. How Walter went for it. "I shot him, Mom. I didn't want to kill Tyler. I felt I had to shoot Walter to make sure my brother didn't get hurt." The detective kept pressing him, kept pointing out inconsistencies between Tyler's story and Eric's, kept showing him evidence that contradicted their claims of self-defense. The gunshot wounds on Walter's body told a different story. Execution-style shots, not panicked self-defense. But all I could hear was my son saying he was trying to protect his brother, because that is what they've always done. Tyler used to watch Eric get beaten with a school computer by bullies and do nothing because he was afraid. But this time, when Sarah told him Walter was dangerous, when she drove them to his house, when violence erupted, this time they protected each other, and it killed man. The detective told me something later that I can't shake. "Eric has got a different attitude. It's almost like he doesn't care. But that is not my son. That is not the boy I raised. That is the boy Sarah created when she manipulated two vulnerable young men into doing her dirty work. Because here is what came out during the investigation. Sarah had been planning this for a week. Text messages on her phone proved it. She'd asked Eric, half joking, "Would you shoot my ex-boyfriend for me?" She had told them stories about Walter's abuse, about how dangerous he was, how he had kidnapped and beaten her. She gave them the address. She orchestrated the confrontation, and when Walter lay dying in the front yard, she showed no emotion whatsoever. The prosecutor charged all three of them with murder: Sarah Collins, Tyler Chapman, Eric Chapman. And for months I fought to make people understand that my boys were pawns, that Sarah had used them, manipulated them, turned their protective instincts into weapons. But then Sarah died. A medical emergency while she was in custody. Brain dead. Gone before she could ever stand trial. And my sons were left holding all the blame. In July 2024, Tyler pleaded no contest to second-degree murder. 15 years in prison. Eric pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. 6 years. I still visit them. I still take their calls. I still hear Eric laugh about something ridiculous that happened in his cell block, trying to stay positive even though his entire future has been stolen. I still hear Tyler's voice crack when he says, "I love you, Mom." And I still ask myself the same question every single night. How did I miss it? How did I not see that Sarah Collins was a predator? How did I let my sons walk out that door with guns and blind trust? They are not monsters. They are not cold-blooded killers. They are boys who made the worst decision of their lives because a manipulative woman told them to. But Walter Jackson is still dead. His daughters are still without a father, and no amount of blame I place on Sarah will ever change that. So here I am, a mother caught between grief for the life that was taken and grief for the sons I've lost to prison. Between the boys I raised and the killers they became in a single terrible moment. Some people say a killer is a killer is a killer. That there is no excuse, no justification, no way to soften what they did. Maybe they're right. But those people will never understand what it's like to hug your son goodbye through prison glass and know it's the last real touch you'll have for 15 years. They will never understand what it's like to hear your baby say, "I'm doing pretty good, Mom. It's fun in here sometimes." And know he's lying just to make you feel better. They'll never know what it's like to be me.
I met him on a dating app in the summer of 2018, one of those swipe-right platforms where everyone looks better in their profile pictures than they do in real life. His name was Marcus, or at least that is what he called himself, and his photos showed a clean-cut man in his 30s, wearing what looked like a police uniform. His bio said he was a detective with the Atlanta Police Department, worked long hours but wanted to find someone special to share his life with. It sounded safe, trustworthy, exactly the kind of stable partner I had been looking for after years of dating men who could not hold down jobs or commit to anything beyond the next weekend. We matched and started talking, casual messages at first about our favorite restaurants and movies, then deeper conversations about our families and what we wanted from life. Marcus seemed perfect, attentive without being clingy, respectful without being boring, always checking in at the end of his shifts to let me know he was thinking about me. He sent pictures of himself in uniform, sometimes with his badge visible, sometimes standing next to his patrol car. Everything about him screamed legitimate, professional, safe. After 2 weeks of messaging, he suggested we meet for coffee, and I agreed without hesitation. But the day before our scheduled date, something strange happened. Marcus sent me a message saying his captain had assigned him to a major case, and he would have to postpone our meeting indefinitely. He apologized profusely, promised we would reschedule soon, and then his messages became sporadic. Days would pass without hearing from him. Then suddenly he would text at odd hours, always with excuses about work emergencies and undercover operations. I started to feel uneasy, like something about his story was not adding up. so I did what anyone with common sense would do. I tried to verify his identity. I called the Atlanta Police Department and asked if they had a detective named Marcus working there, gave them the badge number visible in one of his photos. The woman on the phone put me on hold, came back a few minutes later, and told me no one by that name worked for the department, and the badge number did not exist in their system. My stomach dropped. I had been talking to someone pretending to be a cop, someone who had fabricated an entire identity complete with fake photos and false credentials, and I had no idea why. I confronted him through the app, told him I knew he was not really a police officer, and demanded to know who he actually was. His response came within minutes, and the tone had completely changed. Gone was the kind, understanding man who had seemed so genuine. In his place was someone cold and threatening, telling me I had made a serious mistake by checking up on him, that he knew where I lived and worked, that if I told anyone about our conversations, he would make sure I regretted it. He sent screenshots of my own social media profiles, pictures I had posted months ago showing the outside of my apartment building, my car in the parking lot, even a photo from a work event where my office building was visible in the background. The terror set in immediately. This person, whoever he really was, had been studying me, collecting information, building a file on my life while I thought we were just getting to know each other as potential partners. I blocked him on the dating app, deleted my profile entirely, and reported everything to the real Atlanta police. They took a report but told me that without physical threats or actual stalking behavior, there was not much they could do beyond documenting the incident. I went home that night, feeling exposed and vulnerable, checking my locks 3 times before finally trying to sleep. The emails started the next morning, messages from addresses I did not recognize, all containing the same threatening language Marcus had used, telling me I should have kept my mouth shut. That curiosity was going to cost me. Then came the phone calls, my number somehow compromised despite never giving it to him. Voicemails left in the middle of the night with heavy breathing and background noise that sounded like traffic or wind. I changed my number, but within days the calls started again on the new one. He had access to information I could not protect, ways of finding me that I could not block or prevent. The breaking point came when I left work one evening and found an envelope on my windshield. Inside was a printout of my daily schedule, accurate down to the time I left my apartment each morning and the route I took to the office. At the bottom, written in red ink, were the words, "I told you not to check." My hands shook so badly I dropped the paper, and I called the police again from the parking lot, refusing to get in my car until an officer arrived. This time they took it more seriously, assigned a detective to my case, started investigating the phone numbers and email addresses Marcus had been using. It took 3 months to track him down. His real name was not Marcus. He was not a cop, and he had done this to at least 6 other women before me, creating elaborate fake identities to gain trust before turning predatory when his lies were exposed. The police arrested him on multiple counts of stalking and criminal impersonation, and I testified at his trial about the psychological torture he had put me through, the months of looking over my shoulder and jumping at every unexpected sound. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years, but even now, 2 years after he went to prison, I still feel the echoes of that fear. I do not use dating apps anymore, do not post personal information online, do not trust anyone who seems too perfect or too interested too quickly, because the worst part was not the threats or the stalking. It was realizing how easily I had been manipulated, how willingly I had shared details of my life with someone whose entire existence was a lie designed to trap me. The uniform was fake, the badge was fake, the caring boyfriend persona was fake, but the danger was always real, hiding behind a profile picture and waiting for me to let my guard down.
My name is Lester, and this happened on the very first night of my enlistment into the Singapore Army, October 5th, 2017. The day every Singaporean boy knows is coming, but never feels ready for. In Singapore, every male citizen must serve 2 years of national service. Those assigned to the military are sent to an offshore island called Pulau Tekong for basic military training. People joke about Tekong. Movies are made about it. Comedy films show it as loud, funny, and chaotic. But what those movies never show is Tekong's darker reputation. Before enlistment, I had grown up reading countless Army ghost stories online. Stories about a woman who watches recruits while they sleep, spirits roaming the corridors at night. and soldiers who supposedly never left the island, even after death. I laughed them off back then. I didn't believe any of it. That changed on my first night. The day itself was exactly as expected. Registration, saying goodbye to my family, shaving my head, meeting my bunkmates. 16 of us were placed into one room, metal lockers, double-decker beds, ceiling fans humming above us. Nothing strange, nothing unusual. Then night came. At exactly 10 p.m., the lights were switched off. I lay on the lower deck of my bed, staring at the white wall in front of me. Sleep wouldn't come. I had been a night owl before enlistment, used to sleeping at 4 a.m. That's when I heard it. Soft footsteps, the sound of slippers dragging lightly across the floor. At first, I assumed one of my bunkmates had gotten up, but the footsteps didn't stop. They moved slowly, calmly, circling the entire room, again and again. I turned my head to look. There was no one there. Every single bunkmate was fast asleep. Yet the footsteps continued, uninterrupted, deliberate. My heart began to race. My family has always believed in the supernatural. My mother used to tell me, if you don't disturb them, they won't disturb you. So I did the only thing I could. I kept my eyes shut, pretended to sleep, and silently prayed. That's when I noticed something worse. Every time the footsteps reached my bed, they stopped. For a few seconds, there would be nothing, no sound, no movement, just the feeling that something was standing right beside me, watching, checking, waiting. Then the footsteps would continue, completing another slow circle around the bunk. I don't know how long it went on. Minutes felt like hours. My entire body was frozen in fear. Then, just before morning roll call, the footsteps stopped. They never returned. Later, I asked everyone in the bunk if it had been them. Every answer was the same. No one had gotten up that night. To this day, I still don't know what I heard. My mother believes it was my late grandmother watching over me. But if I had to guess, I think it was something else. Maybe the spirit of a soldier who never made it out of training, or maybe the woman said to patrol the bunks at night, searching for recruits who are still awake. According to the legend, anyone she catches never lives to describe her. And sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't pretended to be asleep that night?
I've taken the subway thousands of times. Born and raised in New York, you learn early that the train is just part of life, background noise to the rhythm of the city. You stop noticing the crowds, the delays, the occasional crazy person yelling at nothing. It all becomes normal, predictable, safe in its own chaotic way. That's what I thought, at least until New Year's Eve, when a stranger decided my life was worth less than whatever demons were screaming in his head. It was just after midnight and I was heading home from a friend's party in Manhattan, tired but happy, my head still buzzing from champagne and laughter. The platform was surprisingly empty for a holiday, just me and a handful of other people scattered along the yellow line, everyone keeping to themselves in that classic New York way where you're surrounded by people but completely alone. I was standing near the edge, checking my phone, when I heard footsteps behind me, quick and heavy, moving with purpose. I glanced up just in time to see him, a man in his 30s with wild eyes and matted hair, his face twisted into something between rage and nothing at all, and before I could process what was happening, his hands hit my back and I was falling. The world tilted and time stretched in that impossible way it does when your brain knows you're in danger but your body hasn't caught up yet. I saw the tracks rushing toward me, the third rail glowing with deadly voltage just feet away, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is how it ends. Dying on dirty subway tracks on New Year's Eve because some stranger decided to push me. I hit the ground hard, my shoulder slamming into the concrete, pain shooting through my ribs and my head snapping back with enough force that I saw stars. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. just lay there stunned and trying to understand what had just happened. Then I heard the train, that low rumble that every New Yorker knows, the vibration through the tracks that means you have seconds, maybe less. I looked up and saw the headlights in the tunnel growing brighter, and panic flooded every cell in my body. I tried to push myself up, but my shoulder wouldn't cooperate, the pain so sharp it made me dizzy. Above me on the platform, people were screaming, someone yelling for me to get up, get out, but my body felt disconnected from my brain, like the signals weren't getting through fast enough. The train was maybe 30 feet away when I finally managed to roll toward the narrow space between the tracks and the platform wall, that tiny gap where maintenance workers sometimes hide. I pressed myself as flat as I could, feeling the rough concrete against my cheek, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. The train roared past inches from my face, the heat and wind and noise so overwhelming I couldn't think. I couldn't do anything but close my eyes and wait to find out if I'd survive. When the train finally stopped, the silence that followed felt unreal. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and fast, and someone shouting from the platform asking if I was okay. I wasn't okay, not even close, but I was alive, and that seemed impossible. Transit workers climbed down to help me, their voices calm and professional even though their hands were shaking. They lifted me carefully, checking for broken bones and burns from the third rail, asking my name and if I knew what day it was. I told them my name was David, that it was New Year's, that a man had pushed me, and their faces went dark. The paramedics came and loaded me onto a stretcher, and as they wheeled me through the station, I saw police officers surrounding someone, a man in handcuffs, screaming about voices and devils and how I deserved it. I didn't recognize him, had never seen him before in my life, and that somehow made it worse. There was no reason, no logic, just random violence from a stranger who decided in a split second that I should die. At the hospital, they told me I was lucky, that I had a concussion and bruised ribs and a dislocated shoulder, but nothing that wouldn't heal. Lucky felt like the wrong word for what happened, but I understood what they meant. The third rail had been inches from my body. The train had missed me by seconds, and if I'd fallen just a little differently, I wouldn't have walked away at all. The doctors kept me overnight for observation, and I lay in that hospital bed, watching the clock tick past midnight again. 1 year ending and another beginning, and all I could think about was how close I'd come to not seeing it. I don't take the subway the same way anymore. Every time I stand on a platform, I'm hyper aware of who's around me, how close I am to the edge, and what I'd do if someone came at me again. Sometimes I see the headlights in the tunnel and my chest tightens, that muscle memory of panic flooding back, even though I'm safe. My friends tell me I should move on, that I can't let one crazy person ruin public transit for me, but they weren't the ones lying on those tracks feeling the train bear down. They don't wake up at night hearing the rumble, feeling the wind, remembering what it's like to be seconds from death because someone you never met decided you didn't deserve to live. The man who pushed me was charged with attempted murder, and they say he'll be locked up for years, but that doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't give me back the feeling of safety I used to have, the ability to stand on a platform without calculating escape routes and watching every stranger like they might be the next one to push, because that's what I learned on New Year's Eve, that violence doesn't need a reason, that any moment could be your last, and that surviving doesn't mean you're ever really free from what almost killed you.
I had been staring at my brother's Facebook profile for almost an hour without realizing it, scrolling up and down the same post while my chest felt tight and my head refused to slow down. It had been a year since he died, and even after all that time, his page still felt like the only place where he existed in some form that hadn't been erased completely. The room was quiet, too quiet for a city apartment at night, and the light from the laptop was the only thing keeping the space from feeling empty. I wasn't looking for anything specific, and I wasn't expecting surprises because his profile had been frozen for months with no changes, no new activity, and no signs of life. Lauren came out the bathroom while drying her hands, stopped when she saw the screen, and let out a slow breath that sounded tired rather than annoyed. She told me I shouldn't keep doing this to myself, that going back there only made things worse. But I answered that it was the anniversary and that I just needed a few more minutes before closing everything. She looked at me for a moment, then asked if I wanted something to eat and said she would go out to get food anyway. When the door closed behind her, the apartment felt even quieter, and I finally moved the mouse to close the browser. That was when the page refreshed by itself. A new post appeared at the top of the profile without warning, without loading, and without any explanation that made sense. My eyes locked onto the image before my mind had time to react, and my body immediately pulled back from the desk. The photo showed my brother close to the camera, his face soaked in blood, his eyes wide open and fixed straight ahead as if he had been forced to stare. The blood didn't look staged or edited, and the expression on his face wasn't neutral or empty, because it carried fear and anger mixed together in a way that made my stomach twist. I checked the name, the username, the friends list, and every detail that would confirm it wasn't real, but everything matched his account exactly. Then I noticed the small green dot next to his name that said active now, and my hands started shaking so badly that I had to place them on my legs. Before I could process that, a message notification appeared on the screen. I didn't open it right away because part of me hoped it would disappear if I waited long enough. When it didn't, I clicked. "Brother, please help me, save me." My chair slid back as I stood up too fast, my heart beating hard enough to hurt. I walked to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and told myself that grief could do this, that my head was breaking under pressure. When I went back to the room, the laptop was still on. The profile picture hadn't changed. The image was closer now, and my brother's face filled most of the frame with more blood running down his skin and into his clothes. His eyes looked strained as if he had been staring without blinking for a long time, and the longer I looked, the harder it became to breathe normally. Nothing happened for several seconds, and that waiting felt worse than action because my body stayed tense and ready to react while my mind raced through possibilities. Another message arrived slowly, letter by letter. "It hurts. You left me there." I reached for the power cord and pulled it from the wall with shaking hands, watching the screen go black while my heart continued racing. I stood there holding the cable, listening to the silence, trying to calm down. The laptop turned on by itself. The startup sound felt painfully loud, and the screen lit up without asking for anything, already showing Facebook open on my brother's profile. His face was closer again, distorted and stretched, and a low sound came from the speakers that made my throat tighten. Before anything else happened, I froze in place, watched image shift as if he was moving forward, frame by frame without stopping. His mouth opened, his eyes focused directly on me, and the ground grew louder. I ran to the door and tried to open it, pulling the handle hard while my breath came out uneven and fast. The door didn't move, and the sound behind me became wet and heavy, like something dragging itself forward. When I turned around, my brother's head was already pushing out of the screen, bending the monitor outward as if it were soft. Blood smeared along the edge as his shoulders followed, and his arms reached forward with movements that looked wrong and uncontrolled. Before he fully came out, there was a moment where he stayed half inside the screen, staring at me with a look that mixed anger and pain so strongly that my legs felt weak. Then his body dropped to the floor, and he stood up far too quickly. He crossed the room in seconds and grabbed my arms with a grip that hurt immediately, his fingers digging into my skin while blood soaked through his clothes and onto the carpet. His face was close to mine, and his voice came out loud and raw. "This was your fault. You killed me." He screamed each word directly into my face while shaking me, his grip tightening every time I tried to pull away. I could barely keep my balance, and my arms felt useless under his strength. That's when I heard Lauren yelling from outside the apartment, asking why the door was locked and what was wrong. My brother's expression changed, his grip loosened, and his body jerked as if something was pulling him away. I twisted the handle again, and this time, the door opened. I stumbled forward and grabbed Lauren, holding onto her while my body shook uncontrollably and my breathing refused to slow down. She asked what happened, what I saw, and why my arms were red, but I couldn't explain anything in a way that sounded sane. When I looked back into the apartment, the room was empty, the laptop was off, and there was no sign of blood or damage anywhere. Lauren stayed close to me that night, watching me carefully while I barely slept. The days that followed were heavy and tense, filled with constant fear that something would happen again. Every sound made me flinch, and every notification made my chest tighten. Before the next breakdown, there was no relief, only waiting and exhaustion. I started therapy because I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. The therapist asked me about my brother, about the accident, about the guilt I tried to avoid talking about. Saying it out loud felt worse than any image or message. I told her I was driving that night, that I was distracted, and that I didn't handle the turn correctly. I admitted that my brother wasn't wearing a seatbelt and that I never insisted, even though I knew better. I explained that the impact threw him forward, and there was nothing anyone could do after that. My chest felt tight as I spoke, and my hands shook the entire time. The therapist listened without interrupting and explained that guilt doesn't disappear when it's ignored because it looks for ways to come back stronger. After that session, the messages stopped. I no longer opened my brother's Facebook profile, and I removed everything connected to it from my phone and computer. I think about my brother every day, and that hasn't changed, but the fear has settled into something heavier and quieter. I still don't know what happened that night. I refuse to believe it was all in my head. When he touched me, I realized that it was real. No one will understand me, but what came out of that screen was a message from the dead.
I never thought a comment about a TV show could put my life at risk. But that is exactly what happened, and there's no dramatic way to soften it. I ran a Facebook page where I talked about movies and TV series because it helped me disconnect after work and because I genuinely enjoyed discussing endings, characters, and bad decisions made by writers who should know better. The page wasn't famous, but it had enough people to feel alive, with regular comments and debates that usually stayed within reasonable limits. I had arguments before, some heated, some annoying, but nothing that felt personal or dangerous. People disagreed, they defended what they loved, and eventually they moved on to the next post. I never shared personal details on that page, and I believed that keeping my real name and my daily life separate was enough to stay safe. I didn't think twice about it because nothing bad had ever come from it before. That sense of safety made me careless without realizing it. Everything changed after I posted my opinion about the Stranger Things finale, and the speed at which things escalated still feels unreal when I think about it now. I wrote that the final battle felt rushed and empty, especially considering how much the show relied on creatures and tension in previous seasons. I mentioned the lack of demigorgons and how the Upside Down felt strangely absent in a moment that was supposed to be decisive. It was a common criticism at the time, nothing extreme or offensive. The reactions came fast and strong, with fans defending every creative choice and explaining why I was wrong. I answered a few comments politely and ignored the rest, which was my usual approach. Then, one comment caught my attention because of its length and intensity. It was a massive text breaking down my opinion line by line, accusing me of not understanding the series and insulting my ability to analyze anything related to cinema. I replied calmly, explaining that it was just my personal take and that disagreement was part of any discussion. That response triggered something I didn't expect. A private message arrived minutes later, written with the same aggressive tone, telling me that my page was an insult to true fans and that people like me should stay quiet. I tried to de-escalate, explaining again that it wasn't personal, but that only made him angrier. When the insults turned into direct attacks and threats, I blocked him, believing that was the end of it. The silence after blocking him felt unnatural, like the calm that comes right before something breaks. I kept checking my phone, even without notifications, feeling uneasy in a way I couldn't explain. That night, I barely slept, replaying the messages in my head and wondering why they affected me so much. The next morning, I found comments on older posts written by new accounts with no photos or activity, all defending the finale with the same aggressive language. I deleted them and restricted their profiles, but my hands were shaking while doing it. Another message arrived from a different account, accusing me of being afraid and claiming that blocking him proved I knew I was wrong. My stomach tightened, and for the first time I felt genuine fear rather than irritation. I stopped engaging completely, hoping that ignoring him would make him lose interest. Instead, the messages became more frequent and more personal, referencing things I had never shared openly. I started locking my door more carefully at night and checking the hallway sounds, telling myself I was overreacting while my body clearly did not agree. The doorbell rang late in the evening, and my first reaction was confusion rather than fear, which makes me angry now. I checked the peephole and saw a man I didn't recognize, standing too close to the door, with his hands hidden and his body tense. When I opened the door slightly, he immediately spoke, referencing my Facebook page with a tone that was aggressive and familiar. Before I could respond properly, he forced the door open with his foot and pushed his way inside. He started yelling about Stranger Things, about fans, about respect, and how people like me ruin everything. His voice was loud, unstable, and filled with anger that felt rehearsed, as if he'd practiced this moment. I tried to push him back stronger and move deeper into the apartment, knocking things over while continuing to shout. My fear became physical, heavy in my chest, making my movements slower and clumsier. When he pulled the baseball bat from behind his back and mentioned Steve Harrington, my legs felt weak and I realized that talking was no longer an option. He advanced through the living room. He kept talking while moving closer, explaining scenes from the finale. He swung the bat slowly at first, hitting furniture, walls, and doors, breaking things on purpose while describing why the ending was perfect and why people like me didn't deserve to speak. When the bat finally hit me, it wasn't a warning strike, but a full blow to my side that knocked the air out of my lungs and dropped me to the floor. I tried to crawl away, but he kicked me in the stomach and started hitting me again, each strike coming with another explanation about character arcs and emotional payoff. He stopped only to grab his phone, standing over me while I struggled to breathe, and took photos from above, making sure my face was visible and swollen. He laughed and told me these were for Facebook, proof of what happens when fake critics disrespect real fans. When I tried to shield my head, he posted the photos, narrating out loud what he was writing, calling it a trophy and tagging my page so everyone could see. Then he put the phone away and continued hitting me, harder now, repeating that the finale was flawless and that pain was the only language people like me understood. By the time he stopped, I could barely move. My vision was blurry, and my body felt heavy and unresponsive, as if it no longer belonged to me. He left without rushing, stepping over me as if I was already dead. I stayed on the floor for a long time, unable to speak or move properly, listening to distant sounds and focusing only on staying conscious. Eventually, someone found me after hearing noise and called for help, and the next clear memory I have is waking up in a hospital bed with tubes and monitors around me. Doctors told me I was lucky to be alive, that the injuries could have been much worse, and that I'd lost a lot of blood. The police showed me screenshots from Facebook that night, images of me on my own floor, bruised and broken, shared with captions praising the Stranger Things finale. Seeing those photos felt worse than the beating, because it meant the violence had an audience. I pressed charges immediately. I deleted the Facebook page by the time I was discharged from the hospital, but the damage did not disappear. Even now, I think carefully before sharing my opinions, knowing how easily obsession can turn into something violent. The man who attacked me believed he was defending a story, but what he really wanted was control and recognition. I was just the target he chose to prove something to himself.
I didn't open Facebook looking for trouble. I opened it because I needed work. I was sitting at my desk early in the morning, half awake, scrolling through job groups, reading posts that all sounded the same, when I saw a group that made no sense in that context. It wasn't related to work, freelancing, or hiring. It had a ridiculous profile picture of a grown man wearing party glasses and a cheap hat, smiling in a way that felt forced even through a small image. The group name said, "Fans of John Smith." No description, no rules, nothing else. What stopped me wasn't the name, because it was generic, but the number of members. More than 700 people. That didn't match the joke at all. I stared at it longer than I should have, feeling slightly uncomfortable but also curious in a silly, harmless way. I wanted to understand why so many people were part of something that looked pointless. I clicked the group, expecting to laugh and close it immediately. The page took longer than usual to load, which made me impatient at first. But when it finally appeared, my attention locked in place. Every single member had the same face as their profile picture. It was the same man from the group photo, wearing the same glasses and hat, staring directly at the camera. Some profiles had small differences. A scarf, different glasses, a hat tilted slightly to one side, but the expression never changed. It wasn't edited badly or filtered. It looked real, which made the repetition disturbing instead of funny. The group feed was worse. There were no text posts, no jokes, no explanations. Just photos of that man, taken in different places and angles. Each post had dozens of comments, sometimes more than 100, and every comment came from the same face again. These were not empty or inactive profiles. They posted daily, commented on each other, and interacted constantly. I clicked several profiles, trying to find a mistake, a crack, something that explained the pattern. They had friends, tagged photos, likes, and normal activity mixed with more images of that man. Different names, different locations, same face. It felt coordinated in a way I couldn't explain. I closed the group after a few minutes, telling myself it was some kind of performance or online joke taken too far. I went back to job searching, forcing my focus elsewhere, convinced that once the tab was closed, the whole thing would stop existing for me. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification, and my body reacted before my brain did. My chest tightened and my hand hesitated before unlocking the screen, because part of me already knew what I was going to see. It was a friend request from a profile with that same face, same glasses, same hat, different name. I checked the profile carefully, scrolling slowly, trying to calm myself by analyzing details, but everything looked real and active. I hadn't joined the group, commented, or reacted to anything, so I couldn't understand how they found me. I didn't accept or decline the request. I closed the app and placed the phone face down on the table, telling myself that ignoring it was the smartest option. 10 minutes later, another notification appeared. Another request. Same face, different name again. Before the third notification arrived, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. I opened Facebook again, trying to stay calm, and saw that the first profile had sent me a message. It wasn't text. It was an image. The man's face filled the screen, closer than before, staring straight ahead without any background. I didn't respond. I closed the app, but the notifications didn't stop. Over the next hour, my phone filled with requests, one after another, until there were more than 100 waiting. Blocking them barely helped because new ones kept appearing faster than I could react. Before doing anything else, I logged out of my account, uninstalled the app, and shut my phone down completely. My hands were shaking and my breathing was uneven because this no longer felt like an online prank. It felt organized, deliberate, and directed at me. 3 days passed without any new notifications, which helped me convince myself that stepping away had worked. I needed food and I needed to feel normal again, so I left my phone at home and went to the grocery store, telling myself that real life had nothing to do with what happened online. I walked through the aisles slowly, focusing on small decisions like choosing brands and checking prices, trying to ground myself in ordinary actions. That sense of control disappeared the moment I noticed someone standing still at the end of the aisle. It was him. Same man, same glasses, same hat. He wasn't holding a basket or a cart, and he wasn't pretending to shop. He was, just standing there, watching me without blinking, his expression flat and empty. My heart started racing and my legs felt weak, but I forced myself to turn away and move faster toward the exit because panic would only make things worse. I dropped my basket by accident, heard it hit the floor, and didn't stop to pick it up. I ran past people and pushed through the automatic doors. Outside, I looked back once and saw him still inside the store, standing in the same place, as if he hadn't moved at all. I didn't wait to see more. I went straight home, checking every reflection along the way, feeling exposed and watched. When my building came into view, my chest tightened again, because he was already there. He stood across the street, facing the entrance, staring directly at me without moving. I fumbled with my keys, got inside, and locked the door behind me as fast as I could. From my window, I looked down and saw that he wasn't alone anymore. There were at least 10 men standing on the sidewalk, all identical, all facing my building, all completely silent. None of them looked around or spoke to each other. They just waited. Before anything else happened, I grabbed my phone and called the police, struggling to explain what I was seeing without sounding insane. When they arrived, the street was empty. All men vanished. Nothing that supported my story. That night, I barely slept. When I woke up in the middle of the night, pressure on my arms held me down. 5 men stood around my bed, moving quickly and confidently, tying my wrists and ankles while another pressed a hand over my mouth. They dressed me like them, placed the hat on my head, adjusted the glasses on my face, and took photos with bright flashes that burned my eyes. "You belong now. You are one of us." Then they left. Morning came, but nothing felt normal again. My phone, laptop, and documents were gone, and every attempt to access my accounts failed. It was as if my digital presence had been erased completely, leaving behind a version of me I didn't recognize. I never saw those men again, but the damage was done. I moved months later, changed numbers, and avoided social media as much as possible, knowing that whatever they wanted from me had already been taken. Last week, my younger brother laughed while showing me his phone during dinner. He found a weird Facebook group. All the members looked the same, like a funny guy with glasses. I didn't ask to see it. I didn't need to.
When I got the job offer in Houston, Texas, right out of college, I accepted it immediately. I lived in Maine my entire life and had never stepped into Texas, so the move was daunting. I knew no one there and had very little money saved up to make the move. I picked this small studio apartment downtown. Apart from my clothes and some utensils, I had nothing to my name. As a girl on a budget, I turned to Facebook Marketplace to find good second-hand furniture. I bought a tea table from an old lady at a reasonable price. Then I bought a big antique cupboard to make my place more aesthetic. But while I was scrolling on Facebook Marketplace one evening, I saw a beautiful wooden dresser. It was straight out of a 1950s movie. In the description of the dresser, the seller, who went by the name of Johnson, wrote that it was his grandmother's. The dresser was custom-made in 1930 and was in good condition despite the years. He simply had grown out of space to keep it and wanted to sell it to someone who would love it just as much. I was an avid fan of anything antique, and the dresser, along with its little seat, was pretty cheap. I immediately contacted the seller and made an offer to purchase it. I had a truck, so I could easily pick it up from his place. The seller was too happy to sell me the dresser, but first he had a few questions. It was odd because all the sellers I'd contacted on Facebook Marketplace so far were more than happy to sell their things at the asking price without too many questions. But this man was different. "I need to ask you a few questions before I sell this dresser to you." What sort of questions?" I texted back as I had no clue. "Have you ever possessed any piece of vintage furniture before?" When he asked that question, I thought he was just reluctant to sell his dead grandmother's dresser to just anyone. He truly wanted it to go to someone who valued it. I respected this man's wishes and answered honestly. "No. However, my dad had a gramophone from the 1940s. "Do you have any plans of reselling it at a higher price or keeping it for yourself?" "I want it for myself," I typed back. "Can you share a picture of the place where you'll be placing the dresser?" This request was odd, but I didn't have anything to lose, or so I thought, so I sent him the picture. It was a quiet corner beside my bed. "When can I pick up the dresser?" I texted, to which he replied, "How will you be taking the dresser to your home? Do you have a proper transport vehicle to do that?" By then, I was growing increasingly frustrated with all his questions, but the dresser was too beautiful to pass up, despite the seller having a multitude of questions. So once again, I answered patiently. "I drive a truck, sir, so I think the dresser will fit perfectly well in it. I've even transported a big wooden cupboard in it." "Can you send me a picture of your truck?" I huffed when I read that message. I ran downstairs and clicked a picture of my truck from all angles to send to the seller, thinking he would finally give me the details as to when and where I could pick up the dresser. But once I hit send on the pictures of the truck, the man backpedaled. "I think it would be good if I just dropped off the dresser at your place. Your truck isn't equipped to transport such a delicate piece of furniture." Did he want more money? Why was he offering to bring it here when I told him I had transported a cupboard that was much bigger than the dresser in my pickup? "Sir, is there an issue with the agreed-upon price?" "No, not at all. I'm just concerned that you might break the dresser while transporting it." "I assure you, sir, I won't. I've used this pickup truck to transport not just people, but a lot of stuff, too." "I think it would be better if I just dropped it off at your place." Truth be told, I was super uncomfortable letting an unknown man come into my home, so I decided to withdraw my offer altogether. The dresser wasn't worth compromising my safety. "I'm sorry, but I'm no longer interested in the dresser. Please find someone worthy of it." I logged out of Facebook and went about my day. A couple of days had passed, and I'd forgotten all about the dresser and the strange conversation I had with the seller. I was busy cooking lunch when my doorbell rang. Before opening the door, I peeped through the peephole. A man I didn't recognize was standing at my door. I cracked the door open and peeked out. "Yes, how may I help?" "Are you Audrey?" the man asked. "I am," I answered, not knowing what this person wanted from me. Was he a new neighbor? The man extended his hand for me to shake, and I had to open my door fully. "Hi, I'm Johnson," he said as he shook my hand. "We spoke on the Facebook Marketplace. I have your dresser downstairs. Will you help me carry it upstairs?" A ton of questions popped into my mind, but the most prominent was how the hell did this man find me? And this was the exact situation I wanted to avoid. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't want the dresser anymore." I tried to shut the door on his face, but he put his foot between the door frame before I could shut it. "Come on now. I got it here for you. The least you could do is help me to bring it up." All the hair on my body was on high alert, as I knew there was something very wrong with this situation. I had clearly stated that I no longer was interested in purchasing the dresser. "Sir, I need you to leave." I tried to sound firm and brave, but I knew I was breaking from within. I was scared as Johnson was a big guy in front of my 5'4" frame. He had held open my door, coaxing me to follow him. I knew something worse was waiting for me. In a split second, I ran into my home, grabbed my phone from the tea table, locked myself in the bathroom. Tears rolled down my face as I dialed 911. Johnson had followed me into my house and was banging on the bathroom door, trying to force it open. I told the operator that an intruder was in my house, trying to harm me. She assured me that the cops were on the way, but I knew that Johnson would break the door before they got here. So in a panic, I grabbed the loose shower head, and as soon as he broke open the door, I hit him hard on the head with it. He fell on the ground right there, blood seeping from his head as I ran out. The cops found me huddled in the lobby of my apartment building. Johnson was arrested and taken to a hospital first. A day later, I was called to the station, and what I was told scared the crap out of me. Johnson was a serial killer who had a history of killing women in their own homes while he visited them under the pretense of delivering a beautiful antique dresser. He had killed 5 women up to now. I was supposed to be the 6th. I was the only one brave enough to fight. He had tracked my location by finding my IP address. I deleted Facebook that day and never bought anything off its marketplace ever again. Johnson was sentenced to life imprisonment. But every time the bell rings, a part of me still gets on high alert.
That night was colder than I expected for Valentine's Day. I had stopped by Richard's house to help him with a quick errand before he went to meet Tanya in the plaza. They hadn't been able to see each other because they were too busy, but they wanted to see each other to give each other Valentine's Day gifts and to spend the evening together. He was a nice guy, Richard. He always talked about Tanya as if she was the piece that made his life complete. I never fully understood that relationship, but it wasn't my place to get involved. I didn't want to bother them. I just wanted to accompany my friend, say goodbye to Tanya, and leave. He was excited to surprise her. The walk to the square was quiet. We talked about the usual, sports, work, and stuff like that. Richard was so animated that he didn't even notice how I couldn't help but think how empty the city was for a Sunday night. When we arrived, the place was no different. A few lights illuminated the benches and trees, but there was hardly anyone in sight. "Stay a while. You'll keep me company until Tanya arrives." We sat on a bench near the bridge while we waited for Tanya. It was then that everything started to feel weird. The place was empty for a long time. We were talking when I saw it. Someone was coming towards us, but it wasn't Tanya. It was a tall guy wearing a black sports jacket walking slowly through the trees. There was no reason to notice him at first, but then I realized that his steps were too calculated, as if he didn't want to lose sight of what we were doing. "Do you know him?" Richard shrugged, playing it down. "Probably someone out for a walk." But the man was still there, closer now, pretending to look at his phone as he approached one of the benches. I tried to ignore him. It was easy to think I was overreacting, but my gut kept screaming that something was wrong. Richard, oblivious, pulled out his phone and started texting. He must be letting Tanya know he's arrived, I thought. That's when the guy looked up and his eyes met mine. His expression was scary. He seemed intent on something. He looked at us with a determination that terrified me as he slowly approached us. "What time is it?" His voice was low, almost monotonous. Richard answered but did not get up. I, for my part, preferred not to say anything. The guy stood in front of us for a moment that seemed longer than it was. Then, without another word, he turned and started walking to the other side of the park. But he didn't leave. He just hovered, like a predator waiting for just the right moment to strike. Minutes later, Richard received a phone call from Tanya. He stood up smiling. "I'm going to look for her on the other side of the bridge. Are you coming or staying here?" I had no reason to stay, so I followed him. We walked together down the dark path while I looked out the corner of my eye looking for the guy we had seen earlier. And there he was. He hadn't left. He was still a few meters behind us with his hands in his pockets and his head bowed as if he were trying to go unnoticed. "It's that guy again?" He just laughed. "What do you think he's going to do, rob us? There are two of us. No matter how big he is, he doesn't stand a chance." Richard seemed pretty sure of himself. That's good, because I was not. We got to the bridge, but no one was there. Richard checked his phone, frowning. Tanya said she'd be here. Just then, we heard rapid footsteps behind us. I turned just in time to see the man approaching at full speed. Before I could react, I felt a sharp blow to my head that left me dazed. My vision blurred as I fell to the ground, unable to move. From there, everything became blurry, as if time had slowed down. Still on the ground, I watched as the man grabbed Richard by the neck, throwing him against one of the bridge columns. Richard tried to defend himself, but he didn't have a chance. The guy was stronger, and each blow he gave him was harder and more hateful than the last. I tried to scream, but my voice was barely a whisper. I struggled to get up, but the pain in my head was unbearable. I could only watch as Richard tried to escape, as he tried to use his arms to block the attacks, but the man would not stop. The last blow was the strongest. Richard fell to the ground, and the man pulled something out of his pocket. A gun. He aimed without hesitation and fired several times. Everything went silent after that. I thought he was going to come after me, but instead he put the gun away and looked around. Some people had run out when they heard the gunshots, but no one came back to help. The man was lost in the darkness, leaving Richard lying on the ground. It took me a few minutes to regain my mobility. When I finally got up, I ran to Richard. His body was cold, motionless. There was nothing I could do for him. Sirens began to wail in the distance, but the man was already gone. The police arrived quickly, but their efficiency was questionable. They asked me questions, too many, as I tried to explain what little I had seen. I had no idea who the attacker was or why he had done such a thing. All I knew was that Richard was dead and that nothing would ever be the same. The officers sealed off the area, but the answers didn't come. I felt helpless, carrying guilt that I didn't know if it was mine. Should I have insisted on leaving earlier? Would it have made a difference if I had? It was weeks before anything more was known about the case. The police discovered that the man who killed Richard was not a random stranger. His name was Reginald Coleman, a guy who had been hired by someone close to him to do the dirty work. The revelation came as a rude shock. Tanya had planned the whole thing. She had hired Coleman to get rid of her husband and collect the life insurance. I would have never imagined that someone so close to Richard could betray him like that. What hurt the most was remembering how Richard spoke of Tanya with such love. He had no idea what she was doing behind his back. How she was planning his death while he was trying to surprise her with a gift. Tanya was arrested and convicted, as was Coleman. But that didn't bring justice, at least not for me. Every time I walk by the park, I feel an emptiness in my stomach, a reminder of what happened that night. Richard was a good guy, and he didn't deserve that ending. I keep wondering if I could have done something to prevent it, but I know those questions lead nowhere. All of that remains now are the memories, the scars, and the bitter certainty that some people are capable of the most terrible things for little money. The park is still there, empty, just like that night. Sometimes I think of Richard sitting on that bench, waiting for Tanya, not knowing that his life was about to end. And I wonder if I will ever be able to stop reliving that moment. This story is based on the real case of Reginald Coleman, who was convicted for the murder of Richard Shook on Valentine's Day, 2010. The crime took place at Belton Bridge Park in Hall County, Georgia, where Richard Shook was found shot to death. Investigations revealed that the murder was the result of a contract killing orchestrated by Shook's wife, Tanya Shook, who conspired with her co-worker, Lenitra Ross, and hired Reginald Coleman to carry out the murder. Reginald Coleman was arrested and charged with malice murder and 2 counts related to gun possession in connection with the alleged contract killing. He pleaded guilty to malice murder and was sentenced to life without parole.
My name's Leah. I'm 18, and for the record, I didn't plan any of this. Things just got out of hand. Before it all went to hell, my life was the same as any other girl in Hellman. School, part-time job at the cafe, wasting hours on TikTok like everyone else. My friends and I used to laugh at stupid videos, make dumb lip syncs, and post filters that made us look like someone else. That's how everything started. A stupid app. There was this girl, Dana. Everyone knew her. Tall, perfect hair, the kind of face that got likes no matter what she posted. We were never friends, but she followed me for a while. Then out of nowhere, she blocked me. I didn't even notice until my classmates started asking if I'd seen the account. It was a TikTok page with my name on it. Or well, a nickname they made up. They posted videos making fun of me. Slow-motion clips from class, taken without me noticing. My face distorted, captions saying I looked like a rat. The comments were full of laughing emojis. The username had Dana's style all over it. At first, I thought it would fade away like every other thing online, but it didn't. It got worse. Every day there was a new post. Someone filmed me walking home, eating, even talking to my friends. It felt like the walls of the city were closing in on me. I tried reporting it, but TikTok just sent an automated message. My mom told me to ignore it. My dad said it was just kids being idiots. But it wasn't just that. They were hunting me online. Then came the messages. Anonymous accounts sending me threats. Comments saying things like, "Wait till we see you after school." I knew it was Dana's group. 5 girls, all younger except her. I didn't even know their names. I only knew their laughs. One Friday night, I snapped. I sent a message to Dana on Instagram, told her to stop hiding behind fake accounts. She answered instantly, saying we could talk in person. "Let's clear things up tomorrow, behind the mall." That's where everything went wrong. I got there early. The parking lot was half empty. The wind carried plastic bags and the sound of a bike chain hitting metal. I stood near the fence, trying to act like I wasn't nervous. I kept looking at my phone, pretending I had control. Then they came. All 5 of them. Dana was in the middle, her hair tied up, wearing that smug smile she always had in her videos. The other 4 were holding their phones like they were ready to film a concert. I felt my stomach twist. Dana walked up to me and said it was funny how I thought she'd stop just because I cried about it online. Her friends laughed. I told her I just wanted it to end. She said it would. Then she nodded to one of the girls. They surrounded me. I remember the cold metal of a phone pressed to my face, the red recording light. Someone pushed me from behind. I fell hard. Dana kicked my ribs while the others shouted things I can't forget. They ripped my jacket, grabbed my hair, and pulled. One of them took out scissors. I froze, but my body kept shaking. The sound of hair being cut filled my ears. I tried covering my head, but fists kept coming from every side. Someone screamed, "Get her face! Get it on camera!" When they were done, they left me lying there, blood dripping from my lip, hair scattered on the ground. I saw one of them checking the video, laughing, saying it would go viral. Dana looked down at me and said, "Now you're famous." Then they walked away. I didn't cry, not there. I just stood up and walked home. Every step burned. My head was buzzing. My mom screamed when she saw me. My dad called the police, but they said they'd investigate. That word meant nothing. 2 days later, the video went up. It had over 100,000 views before I could even report it. Hashtags everywhere. Comments saying I deserved it, that it was just a prank. I stayed in my room for days. Every sound from my phone made my heart race. Then, something inside me changed. I stopped feeling scared. It was like a switch flipped. I started watching the video over and over again, focusing on Dana's face, the way she smiled when she hit me, the sound of her voice echoing in my head. I wanted it gone. I wanted her gone. I started following her TikTok again, but from a fake account. I saw her posting dances, smiling like nothing had happened. The comments were full of hearts, people calling her brave. My stomach twisted every time. I couldn't sleep anymore. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. One night, I went to my dad's tool shed. He fixes bikes sometimes, keeps his tools in perfect order. There was a small hatchet hanging by the window, the kind you use to split wood. My fingers wrapped around the handle before I even thought about it. For days, I carried it in my backpack. I didn't plan anything, at least not consciously. But my body knew something was coming. Every time I saw Dana's face on my screen, I felt closer to doing it. It happened one evening at the park near the school. Dana and her friends were filming another video, music blasting from a speaker. People walking by, laughing, not caring. I walked up slowly, keeping my hood on. My heartbeat felt like gunshots in my chest. When I got close, Dana turned. Her smile froze when she saw me. She started to say something, maybe a joke, but I was already moving. The hatchet hit her shoulder first. I didn't even feel my hand move. The sound it made, dull, wet, cut through the music. She screamed, tried to run, but I pulled it out and swung it again. The others backed away, phones still in their hands, frozen. I hit her again and again until the screaming stopped. Her friends didn't even help her. They just stood there, shaking, some crying. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." I dropped the hatchet. My hands were covered in red. For a few seconds, everything was silent, except the music still playing from the speaker. Then I heard people shouting, running. Someone called the police. I didn't move. I looked down at what was left of her face and felt nothing, just empty. The cops dragged me away while everyone filmed. I saw the red recording lights everywhere, the same light from that night behind the mall. It didn't even feel real. It's been 4 months. They keep me in a white room now. I'm not allowed to have anything sharp. They say I'm under observation. The nurses smile at me like I'm a child. I know they've seen the video. Everyone has. They say I'll stay here for a long time. I don't mind. I don't need to go outside anymore. I see everything on the screen they bring me. News reports, reaction videos, people talking about the girl with the hatchet. They debate if I'm a monster or a victim. I watch all of it. Sometimes I hear Dana's voice in the hallway. I know it's not real, but when the lights flicker, I see her standing by the door, her face split open, whispering the same words she said before kicking me. "Now you're famous." And she's right. I am. The following story is inspired by an incident that took place in April 2021 in Helmond, a small town in the south of the Netherlands. The victim was beaten up by 5 of her schoolmates after they created a hate account on TikTok to mock her. While they were beating her, others recorded everything on their phones. The victim fell to the ground and suffered a skull contusion, severe bruising, and a concussion. She was hospitalized but survived. The video circulated among teenagers in the neighborhood, and then reached the police. The attackers were arrested and released into the custody of their parents. Their identities are kept anonymous.
My name is Sarah Clark, and my mother Annabeth worked as a clerk and security screener at the Louisiana courthouse for almost all her life. Growing up, we could never really afford much, but thanks to the courthouse director, Charles Barton, my mother was able to get a job. After working there for 40 years, she passed away in 2021 from an illness, and Charles quickly offered me the job, despite the fact that I was already in my mid-20s and doing well for myself. I understood my mom's loss was hard for Charles, and I agreed to fill in for a couple of weeks, if only to keep him company. My first day was on the 5th of November 2024. While I wasn't up to speed on many things, most of the job didn't need to be explained to me, as I'd spent endless hours behind the bulletproof glass with my mom, watching monitors and checking strangers' IDs throughout the day. On average, we only had 2 or 3 people come into the courthouse every day. But by the time it was 4:30 p.m., no one had come in, and I had begun checking the cameras and documents one last time in preparation to leave at 5. Surprisingly, at around 4:50 p.m., I heard the doors swing open and close, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. I looked up to see a man in his early 20s. He was dressed in a white shirt with a dark hoodie and black pants and introduced himself as Jason. He appeared soft-spoken and well-mannered at first, as he told me his dad had racked up a couple of fines and he was here to clear them up before he got into some real trouble. I noticed his eyes kept darting back and forth nervously, but this seemed like a sweet gesture, and I completely understood why he'd be nervous doing what he was doing. I needed a little bit more information to help him out, so I said, "Okay, let me just look that up for you. What state did he get all these fines in?" He replied saying, "Right here, ma'am, Louisiana." I put it in and asked the next question. "Now tell me, are we talking about a particular area, driving indecency, or is it all over the place?" Again, he responded quickly, "All over the place." "Okay, well, last thing I need from you is your dad's name." This time he answered just as fast, but there was a difference in the tone of his voice. "Martin Rogan." I typed in the name and was immediately filled with utter confusion. The name Martin Rogan only had one entry in Louisiana for fines, and as far as either of us was concerned, Martin couldn't have been the young man's father as he had no leftover fines, no records of relatives, and most importantly, Martin Rogan had been dead since 1919. I stared at the screen for a few minutes before trying again. Maybe there was someone I missed, but there wasn't, and so I asked again, "Are you sure the name you gave is correct?" The boy nodded, and I responded saying, "Sorry, but there's no record of Martin Rogan in here. Maybe your dad's already paid." Before I could finish the sentence, Jason cut me off abruptly saying, "Sorry, I meant Alex. My dad's name is Alex Rogan." At this point, I could tell he was lying and paranoid, but there was no real cause for alarm. So I said, "Okay, listen, sir, I don't know if you're just messing around or if you're on something, but so I'll ask you to respect it." Once I was done, the whole tone of the situation changed, as Jason didn't say anything back, but instead stared at me through the glass without bother, paranoia, or any of the other emotions he'd shown earlier that day. His eyes looked stale and dead, and in a freakishly calm voice he said, "I know you have some cash in the register. Give it to me, and I won't cut your neck open and watch you die like a dog." I stayed frozen, partly out of fear and partly out of utter confusion, as I couldn't understand how the man's attitude could change so quickly and drastically. I began thinking he couldn't be serious, and I asked myself questions like, why would he rob a courthouse and not some local store like the rest of the criminals? Was he not seeing the bulletproof glass standing between me and whatever plans he had? Finally, after a few seconds of initial shock, I responded saying, "I'm not sure you know what you're saying, sir." Once again, the man cut me off suddenly. His eyes turned red and veins bulged in his neck as he slammed the glass, saying, "Listen here, you bitch. I know exactly what I said, and I'll say it again. Open the fucking door and hand me the money, or else I'll come in there and gut you like a fish." I hit the alarm button and was immediately filled with regret and fear. The man let out a blood-curdling scream, and before I knew it, he punched at the glass so hard, blood and pieces of skin were left over. After that, he punched at it again. This time, harder and bloodier, and despite the fact that the glass in front of me was literally meant to stop bullets, I found myself shaking in fear, as I knew the man wasn't going to stop until he'd gotten through. It all happened in a few seconds, but at the time, it felt like hours, and while I prayed the cops would get there in time, my hopes were immediately dashed, as the man struck the glass again and again before breaking through it with his head and squeezing into the room. I screamed in horror and attempted to run out of the door and escape. Honestly, it was a worthless attempt, and before I could get far, the man grabbed onto me from behind, shoved something sharp deep into my back, and pushed me to the floor violently. I let out a scream as I fell, and eventually, screams turned into tears, and I felt around my back for what he stabbed me with as he searched my desk and took the money from the drawer. Once he was done, the man forced me to my feet, taking a knife out of my back and pushing me back into the room. After that, he was gone, and I lay still on the floor as blood pooled slowly around me. The lights dimmed, and I wondered if I'd die, and what the odds were that this happened to me on my first day taking over for my mom. Soon enough, I began slipping in and out of consciousness, until finally it all got dark. I woke up 2 days later at the East Louisiana State Hospital, and after the doctors gave me the rundown, Charles came in crying, and after apologizing for what seemed like forever, he told me the police were on their way with news about the case. By the time they arrived at 4 p.m. that day, they told me they'd caught the guy, and despite how surreal what I experienced felt like, the police told me it was all as simple as a criminal trying to get some money and thinking hitting up a courthouse would be easier than a bank. Investigations were still going on about how he was able to break through the security glass, but it wasn't a special plan. The man wasn't a psychopathic mastermind, and what had happened to me that day happened to thousands of people every day and will continue to happen to people around the world. That day changed my life forever, and it all happened in a second for reasons as simple as money. That was what haunted me the most, and will continue to haunt my dreams for years.
It was a cold November morning in Perugia when I woke up to the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but watchful. The street outside was still. No clatter of scooters, no shouts from the corner cafe. Just a pale gray light filtering through my curtains, and the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I padded out into the hallway, my bare feet on the cold tile, the air faintly smelling of damp stone and laundry powder. Meredith's door was shut. That wasn't unusual, but something about it felt heavier than normal, like the air on that side of the hall had thickened. I called her name softly, more out of habit than concern, and got no answer. In the bathroom, a small streak of blood marked the side of the sink. Just a smear, as if someone had wiped their finger across it. My first thought was that Meredith had cut herself shaving, but the coppery smell lingered just a second too long. The front door was ajar, only by an inch, but enough for a draft to slip in. I frowned and shut it. I remember thinking maybe one of the others had gone out and forgotten to close it fully. The place was quiet, though. Amanda's room was empty. I poured myself some water, trying not to think about the blood in the sink. The glass was cold in my hand, and as I drank, I could hear faint footsteps above, or maybe just the creak of the old beams. By mid-morning, Amanda and Raphael were back. They moved through the kitchen, talking low, their words too soft to catch, their expressions tight but not fearful. When I asked if they'd seen Meredith, Amanda shrugged, eyes darting to Raphael before saying she hadn't. There was an awkward pause. Then they started tidying the kitchen together, like they were distracting themselves. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't name it. Maybe it was the way Raphael didn't look at me in the eye, or the way Amanda's laugh came too quickly when I joked about the murderous Perugia draft from the open door. It was around lunchtime when I decided to call Meredith. The phone rang and rang. No answer. I sent her a text message. "Hey, you around? The door was open this morning." Still nothing. My stomach felt tight. Amanda suggested we check her room. We knocked. No reply. The handle wouldn't turn. It was locked. I remember pressing my ear to the wood, straining to hear movement. Nothing. Just silence. Deep and absolute. Amanda called the police, telling them there might have been a break-in. The officers arrived quickly. 2 local men in dark uniforms, their boots loud on the tile. They noticed the broken window in one of the other rooms, glass scattered across the floor. One of them frowned at the lock on Meredith's door and asked if we had a spare key. We didn't. They called in someone to force it open. I stood in the hallway, the walls pressing in, my breath shallow. Amanda had stepped back, her arms crossed tight over her chest. Raphael was watching the floor. I heard the splinter of wood as the door gave way, and then nothing. Just a heavy pause. The first officer didn't speak right away. He froze in the doorway, his shoulders tense. Then he turned his head slightly and muttered something in Italian, low and sharp. I stepped forward before he could stop me. The room was dim, the shutters half closed, the air cold. Meredith was on the floor, her body twisted, partially covered by a duvet. There was so much red. Not fresh, bright red, but dark, clotted patches staining the sheets, the pillow, her hair. The metallic smell hit me like a slap strong enough to taste. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and there was something about the way her arm was bent that made my knees weaken. I backed out, the edges of my vision swimming. The officers moved quickly then, speaking into radios, their voices clipped and urgent. One of them herded us into the kitchen. Amanda sat at the table, staring at her hands. Raphael leaned against the counter, chewing his lip. I couldn't look at either of them. Outside, the sky had turned the color of wet cement. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. The cold seeped in through the glass window, and I realized I was still barefoot. I could hear more footsteps now, heavier ones. More officers arriving. As they moved in and out, I caught fragments of their words. Coltellate, assassino. The words landed in my gut like stones. Murder. Stabbing. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a stranger slipping in for a quick theft. I thought about the blood in the sink that morning, the open door, the way Amanda had laughed too quickly, the silence behind Meredith's door. I thought about how close I had been to her all night, just a thin wall between us, while something unthinkable happened on the other side. When they finally let us go outside, the courtyard was crowded with uniforms and neighbors craning their necks. The November air was sharp in my lungs. I stood by the gate, looking back up at our windows, the one with the broken glass, the one still closed tight behind shutters. Even now, I can hear the hollow sound of the door giving way, the stillness that followed, the weight of that room pressing into me before I even saw her, and I can't stop thinking. The signs were there, in the smallest details, and I walked right past them. I was supposed to be boxing up my uncle's things. Nothing special, just old tools, some dusty books and half-rotted junk in his garage. He died 2 months earlier. Everyone said suicide, hung himself in the basement. But even then, I didn't believe it. Not with the bruises they'd ignored. Not with the way the lock on the inside of the door was shattered. I found the USB drive taped under the bottom drawer of his old workbench. Black, no markings. Nothing else in that drawer but dead spiders and rusty screws. I put it in my pocket without thinking. It felt out of place, like someone wanted it hidden, but not destroyed, like it was waiting. That night I was alone. My mom was passed out on the couch. I plugged it into my laptop in my room. Only one file. Cypherdoor.exe. The icon was blank. Just a red dot in the center. I double-clicked. It launched a browser window that didn't look like any browser I'd ever seen. No URL bar, no controls, just a login screen and a single clickable link under it. Recover account. No text field, no buttons, just that one option pulsing softly like it was breathing. I stared at it for a full minute. There was no back button, no way to close the window. Not even a task manager could kill the process. The cursor stayed locked to the window. I didn't click because I wanted to. I clicked because it felt like I had to. The second I did, my phone rang. Unknown number. No ringtone, just loud static. I froze, but answered. "Welcome back, Jonah." The voice was calm, steady, but wrong. It sounded like someone talking through a translator, slightly off, like each word was stitched from 100 voices. "It's time, friend." I didn't say anything. My mouth went dry. They knew exactly where I was. Before I could hang up, the call ended. My hands were shaking when I looked back at the screen. It wasn't a login page anymore. It had opened into a full dashboard, black background, blood red text. No usernames, no icons, just rows of threads with labels like coordinates, dates, and timestamps. The kind of things you'd expect on surveillance software, not a forum. Each entry had a link. Most said video active. I clicked on one. A dim room. A man tied to a chair, screaming into a cloth gag. For 30 seconds he struggled. Then someone walked into frame and turned off the light. Window instantly. The top of the page updated in real time. My IP address appeared in red. Account restored, session active. I hadn't typed anything, but it knew I was there. I scrolled down. There were folders titled Contributions, Witnessed Events, Legacy Access. The last folder had 5 items, all of them tagged Exit Attempt Failure. I clicked the 4th one. The video opened fast, no loading. My uncle's face filled the screen. His hands were zip-tied. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. He was whispering something like a prayer. Then a figure stepped into view dressed in black, wearing a mask like a smooth oval. No mouth, no eyes, just a slit running vertically down the center. The figure raised a syringe. The video cut off just as it touched his neck. A new thread appeared instantly, time-stamped for that exact moment. Viewer, Jonah R. logged. That's when I knew I wasn't just watching. I was part of it now. The feed flickered, and for a second my webcam light turned on. I didn't even think. I slammed my laptop shut, but I knew it was too late. I didn't sleep that night. Every few minutes I thought I heard tapping on my window, but when I checked, there was nothing there. My phone stayed on airplane mode, but at exactly 3:11 a.m., it lit up. No number again, just one notification. Live post created. Jonah R. Feed active. The message came with a link. Against every instinct, I clicked it. My webcam turned on instantly. There was no time to react, no settings, no confirmation. It streamed me directly to the site. I was the post. I unplugged the laptop, tore out the battery, but the screen stayed on. My face was still there. In the corner, a timer was counting down. It was at 000958. And underneath, session lock, final. That's when the whispering started. Not from the laptop, from inside the room. It was low at first, like someone trying to speak through water. I checked the closet. Empty. Then under the bed. Nothing. I stood up and the lights went out. The screen glowed brighter in the dark, my own face staring back at me. But it wasn't a sync anymore. The feed was lagging. My mouth didn't move, but the reflection did. It smiled. Then, the whispering stopped. There was someone in the house. I heard the back door unlock. Not break, unlock. Like someone already had a key. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a broken desk lamp, and backed into the hallway. I heard footsteps, not heavy, just the sound of bare feet dragging slightly across wood. Slow, deliberate. I crept down the stairs, trying not to breathe too loud, but every creak of the wood echoed like a scream. When I reached the bottom, the kitchen lights were flickering. That's when I saw him. The same figure from the video. The mask with the slit. Only now it moved. The slit twitched open. A wet, gurgling breath slipped out. He didn't run. He didn't even lunge. He just started walking toward me, step by step, with the slit in his face expanding into a jagged hole. Inside, something twitched like tongues or fingers. I ran. I didn't care where. I bolted through the living room, slammed the door to the basement, and threw a shelf in front of it. I was panting, barely thinking. That's when I looked up and saw the screen. My uncle's old computer was still on. The same browser. The same site. But this time the thread title was different. Replacement confirmed. The screen showed a split feed. On one side, my uncle was tied to a chair. On the other, my own hallway. Live. The figure was already on the stairs. I tried to break the basement window. The figure was at the door now, slowly moving the shelf aside with inhuman calm. Not brute force, just patience. It had done this 100 times. I grabbed a crowbar and stood back. The second the door opened, I swung. It hit his arm, but he didn't react. His fingers latched onto the bar and pulled it from my hands like I was a child. He tilted his head once, then raised the needle. I didn't feel the needle. I just remember the cold metal against my neck and the way the world snapped sideways. But I didn't pass out. I panicked. I threw my weight forward, slammed past him, and crashed through the basement window. The glass tore my shoulder open. I landed hard on the concrete outside. My leg bent wrong. I screamed and crawled. He followed. Didn't rush, just climbed out through the broken window like it wasn't a problem. I dragged myself through the glass, covered in blood and glass, screaming for help. He didn't speak, didn't run, just walked after me. When I looked back, the slit in the mask was wide open. Something inside it was moving, shifting like fingers and tongues pushing against the edges. I made it to the front yard before he stopped. He just stood there on the lawn, head tilted like a confused animal. Then he turned around and walked back into the house, calm, silent, like he'd finished his part. A second later, the lights in the house all shut off at once. The cops showed up 5 minutes later. My neighbor must have heard me. They found the man inside, still sitting in the basement. Said he was drugged out of his mind, barely breathing. No ID, no explanation. The report said, home invasion. No mention of the mask. No mention of the live stream. My laptop was gone. Since then, people show up outside my house. Different ones every time. Just standing there, staring. They never come in. They don't talk, but they move things. I wake up and furniture is flipped. Drawers are empty. Doors unlocked. Sometimes they leave items. A shoe on the kitchen counter. A photo from my childhood. A blood-stained fork. It's not about killing me. It's about showing me that I can't stop them. That I'm not safe anywhere. They did the same thing to my uncle, and no one believed him either. They don't need to break in. They already have keys. Working the day shift at Wendy's wasn't much better than the night shift. It was quieter, sure, but the monetary was the same. When everything happened, I just finished wiping down the counters when the automatic door slid open with a low hum. A couple walked in. A woman clutching a large purse looked nervous. Her eyes darted around the restaurant as if she was looking for an escape route. The man with her was built like a linebacker. His face looked in an expression of barely contained rage. His eyes swept over the empty tables and landed on me. His glare sent a chill down my spine. The woman shuffled to the counter, her shoulders hunched. The man followed close behind, towering over her, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. I could feel the tension between them, even before anyone said a word. The woman stepped forward hesitantly, her voice shaky and almost too quiet to hear.
I'll take a number 3 combo. Medium fries and a small drink.
The man's face twisted into a scowl, and his voice exploded like a gunshot.
What did I tell you? I said large fries.
She flinched at his words, her lips trembling. She turned to him, speaking just loud enough for me to catch.
I don't have enough money for a large. I brought just enough for what we agreed on.
His fist clenched, and he took a step closer to her, towering over her.
You're useless. Always making excuses. Can't even get an order right.
She looked absolutely terrified, so I stepped in, trying to break the growing tension. Sir, you shouldn't be. He turned to face me, his face red with fury. Without a word, he shoved me so hard that I crashed into the wall behind the counter. My shoulder throbbed, but I forced myself back to my feet. The woman's face was pale, her hands trembling as she tried to calm him down.
Please don't. Don't start a fight. Everyone is looking. You're embarrassing me.
He rounded on her again, his voice even louder now.
Embarrassing you? You are embarrassing yourself. This is all your fault. Look what you made me do. Are you happy now?
I could see where this was heading. His rage was spiraling out of control. He was a bomb waiting to go off. The woman's pleas only seemed to fuel his anger further. When she reached out to touch his arm, he swatted her hand away so hard that she stumbled back a step. I grabbed the phone behind the counter, my fingers fumbling to dial the police. Before I could press the button, he lunged over the counter, grabbing my wrist in a vice grip.
What do you think you're doing? You're not going anywhere.
I yanked my hand away, but he reached across the counter and dragged me forward, slamming me against the register. He started hitting me and never stopped. Again and again and again and again. He was hitting me non-stop, and I couldn't defend myself. And even though there were people in the place, no one tried to stop him. Everyone was too afraid. Pain shot through my ribs as I struggled to push him off. His face was inches from mine, his breath hot and reeking of stale cigarettes. My co-workers were calling the police, but nobody was doing anything to save me. The woman screamed, begging him to stop, but he ignored her. He let go of me, only to grab a metal napkin holder and hurl it across the room. It shattered against the wall with a deafening crash. He turned his attention to the tables next, flipping them over one by one with a guttural roar. The sound of plastic and metal hitting the floor echoed through the empty restaurant. I tried to crawl toward the kitchen, hoping to grab something, anything to defend myself. But he was faster. He crossed the room in just a few strides, grabbing me by the collar and yanking me off the ground. My feet barely touched the floor as he shook me like a rag doll.
You think you're tough, huh? Say something now.
I could barely get a word out before he threw me to the floor again. My head smacked against the tile, and for a moment, everything was a blur. I could hear the woman's voice frantic and desperate, but her words were drowned out by his shouting. When I managed to sit up, he was already tearing the place apart. Chairs flew across the room, one of them smashing into the glass window near the entrance. I saw the kitchen knife then, lying on the floor where it had fallen during the chaos. My heart sank as I watched him notice it too. He picked up the knife, holding it tightly in his hand. The woman tried to grab his arm, but he shoved her so hard she fell to the ground, clutching her side. He turned back to me. He wanted to kill me. He advanced slowly on me, the knife held low but ready. His face was twisted with rage, his eyes wild and unfocused. I scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. My back hit the counter, and I was trapped.
Still want to play the hero? Let's see how brave you are now.
The door opened, and I saw 2 police officers rush in, their guns drawn. They shouted at him to drop the knife, their voices steady but commanding. For a moment he froze, his grip on the knife tightening. His eyes darted between me and the officers as if he was trying to decide his next move. The woman screamed at him to stop, tears streaming down her face. But he didn't seem to hear her. He raised the knife slightly. He wanted to kill me anyway. He didn't care about the police. I braced myself, thinking this was it. But before he could make another move, one of the officers tackled him from behind. The knife clattered to the floor as they wrestled him to the ground. It took both officers to pin him down. I sat on the floor, my chest heaving, watching as they cuffed him. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck as he continued to trash talk me. The woman was sobbing uncontrollably, her hands covering her face. One of the officers helped her to her feet, speaking to her in a low, calming voice. Another officer came over to me, checking if I was hurt. My ribs ached, my lip was split, and my head was pounding. But I was alive. That was all that mattered. The officers told me later that he'd been high on some synthetic drug that made people violent and nearly unstoppable. It took 3 of them to get him into the squad car. That was my last day at Wendy's. I handed in my resignation the next morning. I couldn't walk back into that place. Couldn't stand the thought of reliving those moments every time I saw the counter or the floor where it all happened. I still think about it sometimes. The knife, the rage in his eyes, the sound of chairs crashing to the ground. And every time I hear someone say fast food is an easy job, I remember that day. They have no idea how bad it can get. This story is inspired by a real case. In this story, a white male about 25 years old walked into a Wendy's with his girlfriend. After an employee noticed how he mistreated the woman, he tried to intercede, only to be brutally beaten by the man, who was later arrested.
In my 30 years as a doctor in this hospital, you can imagine that I have seen all kinds of things. Patients fighting for their lives and others who no longer wanted to live. I saw violent families demanding that we do something more to save their family members, and people completely abandoned. Being a doctor is a difficult job, and only experience prepares you to be one. But there was a time when nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Something so strange and out of this world, I can't put into words. That day, I saw evil in its purest state right in its eyes, and it looked back at me. It all started with a patient who had arrived a few days before. She was in intensive care, getting better. The day she was brought in, she had a lot of bruises and fractures in her body. Initially, we thought she had suffered domestic violence, but she was not in a relationship, and when a neighbor told the police about the noises, they found her at home with the door closed, alone. Maybe when she woke up, she was going to give us the answers to so many questions that we had been developing during these days. At that time, I can't say that I was an experienced doctor, but with a little more than 5 years of experience, I could say that I knew my way around the hospital. And that's why I can say that one day when I was doing night rounds at the hospital, I saw something that I don't think many other doctors have seen. I was in the room with one of my patients behind me. I had the strange sensation that someone had walked down the hallway. Hello, is somebody there? Hey, did you see someone behind me? I'm the only doctor around.
Lo he visto. Era un demonio. Te estaba mirando.
Sorry, I don't speak Spanish.
Demon. Demon behind.
What? Did he just say there was a demon behind me? That was weird. The man only had a broken leg and even thought I understood half of what he said. We had a talk a few seconds ago and he seemed in his senses. Now, he just seemed bothered. Like he saw the face of the devil itself behind me. I have to admit, that really scared me.
Demon, don't go. It was a demon. Red eyes and smile.
Hey, take it easy. It could be a lost patient. I have to check it out. Be right back, okay? And just like that, I left my patient. I ran quickly to the door, but when I saw the hallway, it was empty. Maybe he was gone. It may seem illogical, but I felt that something bad was happening. It was something I couldn't see or put into words, but it was as real as anything you are seeing right now. The hallway filled with an almost Gaelic code. I felt the urge to leave, but I couldn't do it. I felt that someone was in danger and that I had to do something. I started to walk down the hallway, and the code was getting more and more intense. I resisted my impulse to leave as fast as I can and kept walking until I reached the girl's room. Her door was open and her lights were on. I had a troubling feeling about her. I felt she was in danger, so I tried to enter her room, but something didn't want me to. The door slammed violently in my face. Was that the wind? No, impossible. There are no windows open and the whole movement was way too violent. I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The girl woke up screaming in terror. Her eyes were wide open. She began to inspect her surroundings, lost. Suddenly, she saw something that terrified her. What was there? I couldn't see a thing. The girl got out of bed and tried to run, but she didn't know she was in a cast, so she fell to the floor. Meanwhile, I was pounding on the door as hard as I could. It was as if the weak bedroom doors were suddenly reinforced. The woman crawled against the wall, away from someone I couldn't see, but it was there. The girl began to feel pressure on her neck, and stuck against the wall, she was floating. She was fighting for her life, fighting to breathe. From behind the door, I could see how her arms and legs were breaking on their own, and from one second to the next, her neck snapped. The girl fell lifeless to the floor. The door to her room opened, and I rushed in. I stared in disbelief at what had happened. She was dead. This wasn't an accident or suicide. Somebody actually killed her. This didn't make any sense, and I refused to believe that there was something paranormal happening. But suddenly, I felt someone behind me. When I turned around, I saw it. A black figure more than 2 meters tall was staring at me. Its body was slender but imposing, and its eyes were red, with the most intense fire I had ever seen in my life. I closed my eyes in disbelief, and when I opened them again, there was no one there. At that moment, I felt someone grab me by the neck and throw me against the wall of the hallway. I tried to get up, but the invisible being kicked me in the face and started stepping on my face as if I were a cockroach. I stood up and ran as fast as I could. As I did so, I heard mocking laughter from behind me, slowly fading into the echo of the huge hospital. It was never determined what had happened to the girl. The footage had disappeared, and although I was a suspect for a short time, the police concluded that I had nothing to do with it. I never saw anything remotely paranormal in the hospital again, but there is not a night that goes by that I don't hear that laughter in the hospital. That mocking, provocative laugh sounds like a reminder that I couldn't save that girl that day.
My name is Rachel. I worked as a 911 operator until everything collapsed because of one mistake I can't erase. I was trained to handle emergencies, but the truth is that after years of picking up calls, you start treating people like background noise. I convinced myself that I was immune, that I could judge what mattered and what didn't. That night, I proved how wrong I was. The room was quiet, a slow shift with barely any calls. I leaned back in my chair, half listening to the operators around me as they talked about nothing important. I wasn't focused, wasn't ready. The call came in and I answered without even straightening my back. A woman's voice came through the line. It was trembling, fast, desperate. The kind of voice you can barely understand because panic makes words stumble. I should have taken it seriously from the first second. Instead, I spoke to her like I was bored. That single choice stayed with me forever. Her name was Jessica. She whispered that her husband had been beating her for months, and that night he had locked their daughter in the bedroom. I heard the way her breath kept breaking between words, but I still acted like I needed confirmation, like she might be exaggerating. She said he was drunk, that he had something heavy in his hand, and that she didn't think she would make it through the night. My system showed the address. I could have dispatched a unit immediately. Instead, I pressed her for details, asking questions that wasted time. The sound on the line shifted. Her voice lowered further, almost impossible to hear, and she said he was coming back into the room. She begged me to send help fast. I told her to calm down. I told her to call back if it got worse. Then the line went dead. I logged the call as domestic disturbance, low threat. That entry sealed her fate. 2 days later, I saw the footage. A neighbor had filmed it through a window, the video shaky and blurred. Jessica ran barefoot across the yard, dragging her little girl with both hands. Her face was twisted in terror, her steps clumsy like she barely had control of her body. Behind them, a man burst out of the house with a tool in his hand. He caught up to her before she reached the fence. The clip ended there. The news confirmed she was dead, and her daughter was in foster care. The audio of the call leaked. It spread across news channels and social media. I listened to my own voice dismissing her over and over while people online screamed for my blood. They called me a murderer, a failure, a monster. The department fired me and left me to rot. I thought the shame was unbearable, until the letters started. The first one slid under my door. It said, "You killed my sister." No name, no explanation, just that sentence written in marker. The next one came 2 days later. "You will beg like she begged." The moment I read that, I couldn't breathe properly. Every noise in my apartment made me jump. I began hearing steps in the hallway at night. Sometimes I thought someone was standing outside my door, waiting. I forced myself to believe it was paranoia, until the third letter arrived. The one that said, "When I see your fear, I will see hers again." The words made me shake because they weren't just threats. They were personal, filled with grief, twisted into rage. I realized Jessica had a brother, and he had decided I was going to pay for her death. The harassment grew worse each night. My phone rang at random hours, and the silence on the other end felt heavier than screams. Knocks at my door came at 3 a.m., soft at first, then harder, always stopping before I could open it. One night I heard something scraping against my window. I lived on the second floor. I pressed myself against the wall, listening to the squeal of metal dragging against glass. When I turned the light on, it stopped, but I knew someone had been there. I carried a kitchen knife everywhere inside the apartment. My hand shook whenever I held it, and I hated how powerless I felt. But there was no choice. I had no job, no money, nowhere to go. The world outside had turned its back on me, and inside these walls I was hunted. The breaking point came when I stepped outside for groceries. Across the lot, a man leaned against a car, watching me. His head tilted just slightly, and I felt his stare digging into me. I dropped the bags and ran back upstairs. That night, he spoke under my window.
Her screams echo every time I close my eyes. You will give me that same echo before I end you.
I barely slept after that. Every sound in the building felt like him moving closer. I sat by the door, gripping the knife, my chest burning from the tension. The attack didn't creep, it exploded. A crash of glass shattered the kitchen, and I heard heavy steps rushing through my apartment. His breathing was rough, animalistic, filled with hatred. I stumbled into my bedroom and locked the door, my heart hammering like it would rip through my chest. He pounded against the door, each hit splintering the wood. His voice roared through the cracks.
You sat there while she begged. You let her die alone. I hear her in my head every night. And tonight, I'll hear you.
I pressed the knife against my leg, but my hand shook so much I thought I'd stab myself. The frame was breaking. I knew the door wouldn't last. I forced myself to grab the phone and dial 911. My voice was a broken mess when the operator answered. The woman on the line didn't dismiss me. She didn't waste a second. She told me to stay low, to keep the phone near, to breathe slower so he wouldn't hear me. Her voice stayed calm while the wood cracked behind me. The door burst open. He rushed in, his eyes wide, his face twisted, not only in rage, but in grief. In his hand, he gripped a heavy wrench, swinging it high. He looked at me like I was Jessica, like by hurting me he could bring her final moments back and change them.
You don't deserve to breathe when she's in the ground.
Before he brought the weapon down, the flashlight beam of officers cut through the room. Shouts filled the air. They tackled him, wrestling the wrench away as he screamed my name like it burned in his throat. They dragged him out while he cursed me, swearing he could still hear Jessica in my voice. I later learned his name was Alan, Jessica's brother. He died that night after attacking officers at the station. His rage was consuming him. Even in his last moments, I survived. But the world doesn't mean what it used to. I live with the weight of Jessica's voice, with the image of her running across that yard replaying in my head, and with the memory of her brother's eyes staring at me like I was the murderer he needed to destroy. The little girl was adopted. I saw a photo of her months later, smiling beside strangers who would never know what she had lived through. I hope she never learns my role in it. Sometimes I listen to the audio of my own call. The night I begged for help while the door broke down. I hear the operator guiding me, treating me with the urgency I once denied another woman. That voice kept me alive. That voice did for me what I failed to do for Jessica.
It happened about 8 years ago. I was in my 4th and final year of college, and all I could think about at that time was partying. I wasn't what you would call a typical college student, as while most of my friends found a good balance between studying and partying, I spent all my time in bars, clubs, basically any place the party was. At that time, all my friends used to call me Trevor the Party Monster. I carried that title like a badge of honor, as I made sure I was always the first person at every party, event, or get-together that was going on. Don't get me wrong, I didn't just party for the sake of it, and it wasn't because I didn't like to study. I partied because it made me feel free, and I was happiest whenever I was jumping up and down to some loud music with a drink in my hand. However, the freedom I felt from partying all the time turned into nothing but crippling fear after my fateful experience at the Midnight Bar. It was the 23rd of November 2015. I'd gotten a text earlier that day saying there was going to be a lit party at the Midnight Bar. I'd been to basically every single bar in my vicinity at that point, but I'd never heard of the Midnight Bar before. I assumed it was a new place that had just opened up, and this party was their attempt to get some publicity. Since they were a new bar, I didn't really know the people behind the party, but just like every party I heard about, I didn't hesitate to go. I started my preparations by telling all my friends where the party was located. I then called my friend Jimmy, who was a DJ, and I told him to get his set ready, as I had already talked to some people to get him to play the music at the party. After that, I called my drug guy, Nash, to get some pills that we could party hard with. There were a few other things that I had to do after my calls, but soon enough, all the preparations were done, and I made my way to the Midnight Bar. The turnout was huge, as I really got the word out there. By the time I arrived, most of my friends were already there, so I joined them. We ordered shot after shot as we started to party hard. Nash had gotten us a wide variety of recreational drugs like LSD, Molly, and angel dust, PCP. There were also some magic mushrooms and vitamin K, ketamine. We each took a small dose of our picks to take the party to another level. I was having the time of my life at that point. The music was blaring, I had a beer in my hand, and I was dancing my heart out. I told myself that things couldn't get any better than this, but that's when I saw her. I can never forget how entranced I was by her eyes. She was beautiful. I watched her as she danced, and I admired every swish and sway her body made. It felt like I was under a spell as my body moved towards her without hesitating. When I reached where she was, I said, "Hi, I'm Trevor. I think you're beautiful." She laughed before responding with, "Hey, I'm Sandra Hill, and I know who you are. You're Trevor Mount, the party monster. Your reputation precedes you." I then smiled and said, "I didn't know drinking booze could make me famous." We both laughed at my joke before Sandra asked, "Do you want to dance?" That was all I wanted at that point, so I immediately said yes. We spent the entire party together from there. We danced, took some more shots, and party drugs. I was enjoying myself, and I could tell Sandra was also having fun. We'd really hit it off as we enjoyed the party. Now, I don't know why I did this. I'm guessing it's because I was so excited at that point, but I took my shirt off and I kissed Sandra. She kissed me back, and it felt like I was on top of the world. I was going to kiss her again when one of my friends, Brian, who was passing by with a camera around his neck, told me and Sandra to smile for a picture. We both looked at the camera for the picture to be taken. Sandra was behind me, and I was up front. I then heard Brian say, "Smile, Trevor," but before he could take the picture, everything went quiet. For some reason, I couldn't hear the loud blaring music anymore. At first, I thought something was wrong with my ears because I was sure they didn't stop playing the music as I was just hearing it a few seconds ago. My loss of hearing wasn't the only odd thing that was happening, as I realized that I couldn't move my body anymore. It felt like time had stopped for me, and things just got worse from there as I watched Sandra's lower jaw expand to an inhumane level and how her now lengthy tongue rolled onto my skin. Horrified, I tried to scream, but I couldn't move my mouth. My brain tried to make sense of everything as I asked myself why I was frozen in place, and why Sandra had now turned into something that looked like it crawled out of hell. As I felt her tongue on my skin, an unimaginable pain rippled through my body. I don't know really how to explain it, but it felt like I was dying and my life was being sucked away by Sandra's morbidly long tongue on my skin. I don't know how long it lasted, but it could have been an hour or two. Soon, everything around me started to get blurry, and eventually, it all went dark. I woke up in the hospital a few hours later, surrounded by a doctor and my friends. They told me that I'd passed out from dehydration and the mixing of hard drugs with alcohol. I was still scared of the horrific things I'd experienced, so I started to tell them what happened with Sandra, but my friend Brian, who rushed me to the hospital, told me that there was no one named Sandra at the party. Shocked, I told him that was impossible, and I asked Brian about the picture he took. Brian then told me that I was alone when the picture was taken. Frustrated that no one was listening to me, coupled with the fact that they were all looking at me like I was crazy, I started to scream and cry at the same time. I remember screaming the words,
She was real. Sandra was real, and she's a monster. She's a demon.
I was soon subdued and given a sedative that calmed me down. I spent another 2 days in the hospital as they wanted to check if everything was all right with my head. No one believed me. All the doctors said I'd hallucinated what I saw due to the hallucinogenic drugs I'd taken, but I knew that wasn't true. I had made sure to take the drugs in small doses during the party, so it was hard to believe that I hallucinated something that lucid. Plus, I never had an episode like this ever since I started doing recreational drugs. I told the doctors this, hoping they would believe me, and even though they confirmed that I'd taken the drugs in small doses, they told me that there was no other possible explanation to what I'd seen. My only hope now was the picture Brian took, but whenever I show the people the picture Brian had taken, they tell me that they can only see me in the image. Things just got stranger from there, as any time I look at the picture, I can still see her behind me. I don't know why I was the only one who could see Sandra in the photo, but it drove me crazy and I had to undergo some serious therapy. It's been a long time since this happened, but I still haven't forgotten that incident. I have my theories as I look into the morbid experience to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. It was hard, but I finally found two people, a man in Slovakia and another man in Greece, who said they'd experienced something similar at a strange bar in their countries. At the end of my research, I believed the woman called Sandra Hale was a succubus, a female demon who seduces men and feeds on their life force for sustenance. And the only thing I have to prove it is this picture. I've tried time and time again to get people to believe me, but no one does, as they all say, I'm not right in the head. So I decided to put my story out there. This entire incident has also put me off parties, especially the ones held in bars. So be careful out there, as you never know if it's your favorite bar, where the actual party monsters like Sandra are lurking. I moved in a few weeks ago. It's a one-bedroom apartment, second floor, old building. Nothing fancy. It came semi-furnished, which meant I didn't have to worry about buying a couch, a bed, or even a microwave. Rent was cheap, and the neighborhood was quiet. Maybe too quiet. I live alone, just me and my cat, Baxter. He's about 6 years old, gray with black stripes, and usually pretty calm. He took the move well, but since day one, he's avoided the living room. More specifically, the couch in the living room. At first, I thought maybe there was a smell or something stuck in the fabric. I checked under the cushions, looked for bugs, spilled food, anything. Found nothing. Still, he wouldn't go near it. He'd walk into the room and freeze if the couch was in his path. Then, he'd circle around it like it was a hole in the ground. One night, I saw him hissing at it from the hallway. No reason, just sitting there puffed up, growling low. That was the first time I felt uncomfortable in the apartment. But I pushed it down. It was just a cat being weird. That's what I told myself. That weekend I was messing around with Snapchat filters, just bored, filming Baxter with those dumb puppy ears and face distortion effects.
He hated it. Typical. Then I pointed the camera around the room, just looking at how the filters mapped random objects. It was when I panned past the couch that I froze. The face filter locked onto the top right cushion, right where someone's head would be if someone was sitting there. I thought it was a glitch, so I pulled it back. The filter disappeared. Moved the phone closer again. Face appeared, smiling, not cartoonish like the rest. It was subtle, human-like, not exaggerated. Eyes locked forward, unmoving. I stood up and moved around the room, tried the filter from different angles. Same result, always on the top part of the couch, as if it was mapping to something invisible. I even switched filters. Every single face filter latched onto the same spot. I backed away slowly. The filter stayed fixed. The longer I looked at it, the more I realized the face wasn't just appearing. It was following. I moved right. The face shifted left. I moved left. It tracked me, like it was watching. I dragged the couch away from the wall, gripping the phone with both hands. Moved it slow, backward without taking my eyes off the screen. The face didn't glitch. It didn't vanish. It moved with the couch. No matter where I placed it, the filter kept mapping something on the same headrest cushion. That thing was still there. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the app. Maybe some weird lighting. But deep down, I knew better. I turned the couch around, just in case. That's when the face rotated too, locking onto me, watching me straight on. No reaction, just presence. My fingers were trembling, but I pushed the couch into the hallway anyway. Its weight scraped the wood and echoed through the apartment. I didn't care about the noise. I wanted it out. I shoved it toward the door, turned it sideways, dragged it down the stairs step by step. The whole time I kept checking the phone. The filter stayed fixed, dead center. I left it on the curb, angled away from the building. Thought that would be enough. Thought I'd done something smart. When I got back upstairs, I locked the door and shut every blind. But the silence didn't feel like safety. I couldn't stop myself. I walked over to the window and peeked out through the side of the curtain. The streetlight buzzed above the couch. I raised my phone. Snapchat still open. The face was there. Even from that distance. Still centered on the same spot. Still facing my direction. It hadn't disappeared. It hadn't even shifted. Just waited. That night, I fell asleep without remembering how. 1 second, I was lying there, scrolling mindlessly. The next, I was frozen. Awake, but not awake. I couldn't move anything. My eyes were open, stuck on the ceiling, breathing shallow. It was like my whole body had disconnected, but not the fear. The fear worked fine. My heart slammed against my chest like it wanted out. Something was wrong. Not vague, not abstract. Something real was in the room. Only my right hand twitched. Barely. My phone was still next to me. My thumb dragged it closer. The screen lit up my face in a faint glow. Snapchat was already open. And the couch was back, at the foot of the bed, right in front of me. I tried to rationalize again, but nothing made sense anymore. I had thrown it away. I saw it on the street. I left it there. But now it was here. Same cushion, same burn mark near the armrest, same exact shape. I aimed the phone at it, just to see. Maybe to prove I wasn't losing it. The filter caught something instantly. The face appeared, but it wasn't static this time. It was rising. Slowly, like something getting up. First, just the eyes above the cushion. Then the mouth. Then the rest of the head. It wasn't just standing there. It was reacting. It knew I was watching. And then the filter glitched downward. Recentered. Now it was tracking something closer. Something on the bed. I didn't want to believe it, but I had no choice. The shape had moved from the couch onto the mattress. The pressure at my feet hit a second later. Not immediate like in a dream. This was slow and cruel. First, just a shift in the blanket. Then wait. enough to sink the mattress slightly. I kept the phone aimed at the spot. The filter followed. It mapped the thing crawling toward me, like it was analyzing each movement. It was hunched low, trying to stay out of sight, but the filter picked it up with perfect clarity. A distorted face, teeth clenched, eyes blank. It didn't blink. I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't listen. My chest burned like my lungs were locked. The thing crawled with its knees and elbows, dragging itself closer with uneven rhythm. I could feel the shift in pressure each time it moved. The bed creaked softly, but there was no sound beyond that. No breathing, no footsteps. Just slow progress and that growing, suffocating heat that rolled up my legs with every inch. The filter warped again as it approached my waist. Its face moved like it was stretching, like it was trying to tear the digital skin off. My thumb shook violently. The phone was slipping. I couldn't look away. The thing was almost on top of me. Then I felt it. A breath, hot and rancid, directly on my stomach. I was seconds from blacking out, not from fear, but from the sheer pressure building inside my own body. I didn't see Baxter leap, just felt the bed shake. His claws dug into my ribs as he landed on me, hissing, ears pinned back. That snapped something loose in my head. I gasped. The gasp turned into a scream. My limbs jerked free all at once. I shoved myself upright, clawing at the blanket, dragging Baxter with me. He wasn't trying to run. He was trying to protect. The couch was still there at the end of the bed, but the presence, whatever it was, had vanished. I didn't waste time looking for signs. I bolted for the bedroom and nearly tripped over my own feet in the hallway. That's when the heat slapped me against the face for real. Not phantom warmth, but dry, dangerous heat. I turned the corner and saw the kitchen glowing. Orange flickers bouncing off the walls. The stove was on, all 4 burners. The curtains were already halfway gone, curling into black smoke. Flames climbed the wall like they had a path to follow. I could barely see. I scooped up at Baxter with both arms and ran. Didn't even grab my shoes. The hallway was already full of smoke. My eyes burned. I stumbled down the stairs coughing, almost fell twice, and burst out the front door choking. People had gathered on the sidewalk, backing away from the flames. I turned around just once, just to see. The couch wasn't there anymore. Not in the room, not in the fire, not on the curb, just gone. I stayed at a friend's place after that. Didn't talk much. I told her about the fire, not about the filter, not about the couch, not about what crawled up the bed and stared into my ribs. I didn't want to hear myself say it out loud. I've been sleeping with all the lights on, windows shut, phone deleted. Not just the app, everything. I use a flip phone now. Baxter hasn't left my side. He sleeps on my chest, alert, watching the room. Sometimes he growls at nothing, but I don't ask why. I don't want to know. A few nights ago, I woke up to that weight again. Lower this time, at my knees. It didn't last long. Just long enough for the mattress to bend under something that wasn't there. I didn't open my eyes, just kept still, breathing shallow, pretending I wasn't awake. And then I heard it. Plastic crackling, like burning fabric being crushed slowly. Just for a second. When I finally looked, there was nothing. No couch, no face, but the floor still smelled like smoke.
I started this job 3 months ago. Night driving. Simple stuff. I pick up clients, drive them to wherever they say, and don't ask questions. That's the rule. No questions, no problems. That's what the guy who hired me told me. The pay was good enough to make me ignore how vague it all sounded. I didn't sign anything. They just told me where to go and when. Always at night. Always in black cars that weren't mine. The passengers were strange. Always men in suits. Never women, never kids. No one ever spoke. They just got in, gave me an address, and stared out the window or at their phones like I didn't exist. I tried small talk a couple of times, but they'd look at me like I'd broken some sacred rule, so I stopped. I learned to drive in silence. Still, every night felt off. The way they acted, it wasn't normal. Their faces were too blank, their voices too calm when they gave the addresses. And sometimes when the car stopped at red lights, I'd feel eyes on me. I'd look up through the mirror and one of them would be staring directly at me. No emotion at all, just staring. It made my stomach twist every time. But I needed the money. Rent was late, bills were piling up, and this was the only job that didn't care about my record. So I kept driving, pretending not to notice how wrong everything felt. They called me just after midnight for a pickup outside an office building downtown. When I got there, 2 men in suits were standing on the curb. Between them was a man sitting in a wheelchair, his head tilted slightly to one side, dark glasses covering his eyes even though it was pitch black outside. One of the men waved me over like I was a cab. They opened the back door and lifted the man out of the chair. His body hung limp between them like he was drunk or asleep. They sat him in the back seat, adjusted his coat, and shut the door without saying a word to me. Then one of them leaned in and said, low and sharp, "Drive to 77 Willow Street. No stops." There was something off about the way he said it. His tone wasn't a request. It was a warning. I nodded and started the engine. The 2 men stayed on the sidewalk, watching until the car turned the corner. I kept my eyes forward, hands tight on the wheel. The first thing I noticed about the man in the back was his smell. It hit me halfway down the block. Cheap perfume. The kind that burns your nose. Strong enough to make me roll the window down a crack. I glanced in the mirror. He was sitting straight, facing forward, his hands on his knees, still, not breathing heavily, not moving at all, just sitting there. The route was long, 30 minutes through quiet streets with barely any traffic. Every minute stretched. The man in the back didn't move once. I tried to convince myself he was asleep, but there was no rhythm to his breathing, no sound at all, just that perfume, like the inside of a cheap funeral home. At one point, I cleared my throat and said something. "Sorry about the traffic. It's usually lighter this time of night." Nothing, not a word. I looked again in the mirror, hoping for even the smallest reaction. His head hadn't moved, but under the dark glasses, could have sworn he was looking straight into the reflection. Felt it. Like the second I looked away, he'd blink or smile or something worse. The longer I drove, the more I started to shake. My fingers slipped on the steering wheel from sweat. I thought about pulling over, just for a second, to breathe. But the words, "no stops," echoed in my head. The company didn't play around. I heard stories about drivers who broke the rules. None of them worked there anymore. Then came the sound, a low, broken mumble from the back seat. I froze. It wasn't a word, more like a moan, soft and wet, like someone trying to speak underwater. I looked in the mirror again, and for the first time he moved. His jaw shifted slightly, trembling. I slowed down just enough to glance over my shoulder. He was shaking. His hands twitched on his knees, fingers jerking like he was fighting to move. His lips parted, drool sliding down his chin. I gripped the wheel tighter and forced myself to keep driving. My heartbeat drowned out the sound of the tires. I couldn't take it anymore. The sounds were getting louder, whispers maybe, words I couldn't make out. I leaned forward, pretending to adjust the radio, but my eyes went to the mirror again. His head turned, just a little, enough for me to see his mouth move. It wasn't random mumbling now. It was like he was trying to form sentences, but his tongue wasn't working right. His teeth clicked together. His head twitched forward, slow at first, then faster, until his chin almost hit his chest. He was convulsing, softly, like something was crawling under his skin. My stomach flipped. I wanted to stop the car. I wanted to open the door and run. But that voice from my boss, "no stops," stuck in my head like a nail. My job was to drive. That's it. Then he made a sound I'll never forget. A laugh, or maybe it was a cough. Sharp, dry, and too human to ignore. I pressed harder on the gas. The faster I went, the louder he got. His breath came in short bursts. Then, suddenly, silence again. I didn't want to look, but I did. His head was up now, perfectly straight. His glasses reflected the dashboard lights, but behind the reflection, I could see movement. His eyes. They weren't looking forward anymore. They were aimed directly at me. I started crying without realizing it. Quietly, trying not to make a sound, I couldn't tell what was worse, the silence or the breathing behind me. Every second felt like it stretched longer than the last. When I finally saw the street sign for Willow, I almost screamed in relief. The address was at the end of a cul-de-sac. No lights, no houses, just a big metal gate and 2 black cars parked outside. The same kind of men were waiting there. Dark suits, blank faces. I stopped the car, put it in park, and tried to steady my breathing. They walked over slowly. One of them tapped the window. I rolled it down, shaking so hard I could barely move. I told them something was wrong with the man in the back. I didn't want to turn around to show them, but I had to. I looked and saw the man jerking slightly, mumbling again. His glasses had slipped down, showing pale eyes rolled halfway back. One of the men opened the back door, glanced at him, and his face twisted in anger. The other guy stepped forward, grabbed the man by the throat, and started squeezing. There was no hesitation, no shouting, just the sound of cracking bones. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The driver's seat felt like a coffin. The man in the suit dropped the body to the ground like trash. Then he pulled out his phone and started yelling at someone.
He was alive. You told me he was processed.
He slammed the phone shut, breathing hard. He turned to me, eyes full of rage. Before I could react, he reached in, grabbed the back of my head, and slammed it against the steering wheel. My ears rang, everything spinning. He leaned in close, whispering through his teeth.
You didn't see anything. You didn't hear anything. Drive when we call. That's all you do.
I nodded, barely able to see through the blood in my eyes. I don't remember driving home. The next thing I knew, I was in bed, still wearing my work clothes. My phone buzzed at noon. A message from the company. Pick up at 1 a.m. Don't be late. No explanation, no apology, just that. That night I showed up like always. Same car, same smell of cheap air freshener. My head still hurt, and the dried blood on my hairline itched under my hat. The streets were empty, again. Every shadow looked like those men waiting for me. The passengers didn't talk, didn't look at me, didn't act like anything had happened. But I couldn't stop seeing that man's neck snapping in front of me. Every time I blinked, I saw it again. The way his body twitched once before going limp, and the way the other man didn't even flinch. Now, every time I drive, I feel like someone's in the back seat, even when it's empty. Sometimes I check the mirror and swear I see him sitting there, head tilted, glasses on. That same damn perfume filling the car. It's been 2 months since that day. I still drive for them. I can't quit. Every night they text me new addresses, new passengers, new names. No explanations. I just drive.
Hi, my name is Jessica, and something terrible happened to me last night. I don't really have immediate family or close friends, and I really want to get it off my chest, so I will just tell it to you guys. I work at a call center, and if one thing those places are famous for, it's the odd working hours. Lately I've been a little tight on money, so I decided to pick up the night shift that pays more. The worst part of the night shift wasn't the work itself, but the hassle of finding commute back home. I don't own a car, so my best option is to wait for a late-night bus or call an Uber. Most nights I call an Uber, as the bus service is unreliable, but I don't think I'll ever get in an Uber after last night. Hell, I'm not even working nights anymore. As usual, I got off work at 2:30 a.m. and booked an Uber as I got down from my office. Luckily, there was a cab in the vicinity and the app booked it for me. I was dead tired, hungry, and sleepy at the same time, so as soon as the white cab parked on the street across from me, I got in the back seat and relaxed while the driver started driving. Now, you must know that I live a little far away from my office, so it usually takes half an hour to reach home. We cross 3 signals in the way and take 2 bridges. Just as the cab neared the first signal, I was ready to doze off. When the red light was on, the cab stopped and I was casually scrolling through my phone. That's when someone opened the driver's side door and a young man in his 20s peeked in. "Can I get a ride till the next intersection, please?" he asked the driver politely, and the driver, who must be in his 50s, replied, "Get in." He never once asked me if I was comfortable letting a stranger ride in my cab that I was paying for, but I was so drained that I didn't object. Not intervening then was my biggest mistake. I was a little alert after that, but not as much as I should have been. The next signal was up ahead of us and the intersection just beyond it. That's when a text from an unknown number popped in my phone. "Get out of the cab immediately. Not safe, stolen car, fake driver, get out now." I must have read that text at least 5 times. Before I knew that I was in a problematic situation, the young guy casually chatted with the driver as they both kept on looking back at me through the rearview mirror. The car was moving, and there was no way I could get off at that point. Neither could I confront the 2 men. I couldn't even call the cops as the men would get suspicious. So I dug into my bag and held onto the pepper spray, praying to God that the text I received was a prank. However, the next intersection came and went by, but the cab didn't stop. "Keep going, I'm just up ahead," the man told my driver, who nodded and kept driving. However, we were nearing the 3rd signal and the young man was still in the cab getting comfortable. I had planned to escape the car as it would stop at the intersection, but instead the driver took a rough left turn onto a deserted road. "Hey, that's not the way! Where are we going?" I yelled as I went into a full-on panic mode. "It's a shortcut, lady," the driver grunted, but I knew this place like the back of my hand, and this was no shortcut. This was a trap. The car sped up and I dialed the cops. The operator kept on asking what my emergency was, but I could not utter a word, too scared to spook my kidnappers. The car stopped at a warehouse, and as I was about to bolt, the driver locked the car, and both the men looked at me. "Now, young lady, you can either give us what we want willingly, or we can take it by force," the young man said, and I immediately fished for cash in my purse. "I'll give you all my money, just let me go, please, please, I beg you." Ugly sobs raked my face, terror gripping my body. "If money was what we wanted, we could have just snatched your purse, no?" The old man snickered and gave me a hungry look. That's when I knew they wanted to violate me sexually, and I clutched the spray in my hand. There was no one for miles on end, and no one would hear my cry for help here. The young man got out of the car and pulled my door open, grabbing me by my hair, ready to pull me out. But just then, I sprayed him. "Fuck, you bitch! Hell, it burns!" He let go of me and began wiping his eyes. The older man reached for me, but instead the whole dark warehouse got lit. Floodlights were everywhere, and footsteps and shouting began. "Police, get down on your knees, show us your hands, and let go of the woman." Cops surrounded the place, and I went limp inside the car. The next few minutes went by in a blur, but there were doctors and cops who wanted to talk to me. But I was so confused. The cops later told me that the cab was really stolen and the real owner, Mr. Amir, a Sri Lankan man, had reported it. However, the thief had logged into Mr. Amir's Uber account and was driving around people pretending to be Mr. Amir. The cops couldn't figure out the thief's motive, but they knew something was up. The GPS tracker in the cab allowed the cops to keep tabs on it, so they kept tracking the vehicle. But when I got into the car at night, the cops had had enough. The cops had hacked into Mr. Ramirez's Uber account to get my contact information, and that text I had received was from the cops warning me. However, when the cops investigated the two men, they found out that one of them was a repeat sex offender responsible for at least sexually violating 6 women in various states around the country. He was out on parole. The other was his nephew, who had multiple charges, a misdemeanor, and theft on him. He was even involved in carjacking a government vehicle. Both these individuals were extremely dangerous, and I was their latest victim. If only the cops hadn't arrived when they did. I am not sure if I would still be here telling you this story or not.
I still remember everything. Hell, how can I forget that night? I remember being excited for being in front of that house. It looked like something straight out of a movie. Tall windows, creaking wood, and a slight tilt to its frame that made it seem like it was leaning in to hear secrets. I'd booked a few nights at the infamous Stanley's Airbnb, the haunted spot everyone online couldn't shut up about. People claimed they'd seen him. A ghost who likes to mess around but never hurt anyone. They said he was playful, even friendly. That's exactly what I wanted. A harmless thrill. Something to tell my friends about. When I got there, the host had left a handwritten note on the counter. Enjoy your stay. Stanley's harmless. Unless you provoke him. I laughed at that. Cute. They really leaned into the gimmick. The house was cold inside, colder than it should have been for late summer. I figured it was just old insulation. No big deal. I spent the first night wandering around, looking for anything out of the ordinary. All I got were a few creaky floorboards and a light that flickered in the upstairs hallway. Not exactly the spine-tingling experience I'd hoped for. The second night, I decided to step it up. If Stanley wasn't going to show himself, I'd make him. I'd seen enough ghost hunting videos to know the tricks. Call him out, challenge him, maybe even taunt him a little. It felt silly at first, standing in the middle of the living room, shouting at an empty house. Come on, Stanley. Show me what you got. What, are you scared? Nothing. Just the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I laughed at myself, but part of me was disappointed. I tried again, louder this time. You're supposed to be this big bad ghost! Still nothing. No wonder why you're just a local attraction. Imagine being a ghost and still being this pathetic. That's just lame, Stanley. No wonder why you don't show up. By the time I gave up, it was nearly midnight. I went upstairs, brushed my teeth, and climbed into bed. That's when I heard it. A faint scratching noise. It sounded like it was coming from inside the walls. At first, I thought it was mice. Then it got louder, more deliberate. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Like something sharp was being dragged against the wood. I sat up, heart pounding, and listened. The sound stopped. The next morning, I found scratches on the outside of the bedroom door. Deep, jagged marks that hadn't been there before. They looked fresh, like someone had taken a knife to the wood. I tried to convince myself it was a prank. Maybe the host trying to add to the experience. But when I called them, they swore they hadn't been there since the last guest. The day passed without incident, but the house felt off. The air felt heavy, like the kind of pressure you feel before a storm. That night, I tried to keep things light. I watched a movie on my laptop, drank a couple of beers, and avoided calling out to Stanley. But the house wasn't going to let me off that easy. Around 1 a.m., the TV in the living room turned on by itself. I went downstairs expecting to find the remote had fallen and hit a button, but it was still on the coffee table. I turned the TV off and started back up the stairs when the scratching came back. Louder this time. It wasn't in the walls anymore. It was coming from the front door. I stood at the top of the stairs, staring down at the door. The scratching was relentless, frantic, like whatever was on the other side was desperate to get in. I grabbed a fireplace poker from the living room and crept toward the door. The moment my hand touched the knob, the scratching stopped. I flung the door open, but no one was there. The porch was empty, the street silent. Just as I started to close the door, I felt a rush of cold air blow past me into the house. My stomach sank. I locked the door and backed away, trying to convince myself it was just the wind. Then the lights went out. Every bulb in the house all at once. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, and the beam shook in my hands. I could hear footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate. They moved from room to room, pausing just long enough to make it clear they weren't mine. I ran up the stairs, shouting at whatever was up there. "Who's there? What do you want?" The footsteps stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the door to the bedroom slammed shut. I froze. My brain screamed at me to leave, but my body wouldn't move. Finally, I forced myself forward, shoving the door open. The room was empty, but the bed was unmade. The sheets twisted like someone had been thrashing around in them. On the wall above the bed, scratched deep into the plaster, was a single word. Leave. I couldn't leave. I had nowhere to go until daylight. I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room waiting for morning. Around 4 a.m. the air changed. It felt electric, like the house was holding its breath. Then the banging started. It came from everywhere, the walls, the ceiling, the floor. It was deafening, like the whole house was trying to shake itself apart. I ran to the front door, but it wouldn't budge. The lock wouldn't turn, and when I tried to kick it open, it felt like I was hitting solid concrete. The windows were the same, unbreakable no matter what I threw at them. The banging grew louder, more violent, and then it stopped. Silence. Pure, suffocating silence. That's when I felt it. A presence, standing right behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Cold figures brushed against the back of my neck, and I bolted, running upstairs and slamming the door to the master bedroom behind me. I could hear footsteps following, slow and deliberate, stopping just outside the door. I didn't want to see what would happen next. I grabbed a chair and smashed it against the bedroom window until the glass finally shattered. It wasn't a big enough hole to climb through, but it was a start. I grabbed the nightstand, the lamp, anything I could find, and kept swinging until the window was wide open. As I climbed through, I felt something grab my ankle, pulling me back. I kicked and twisted, finally breaking free and tumbling onto the roof. I didn't stop. I slid down the shingles and jumped to the ground, hitting the dirt hard enough to knock the wind out of me. The front door burst open, slamming against the wall. That's when I saw him. Stanley. He didn't look like a ghost. He was a man, or at least he used to be. His face was pale, twisted into a grotesque grin. His eyes were black, endless pits, and his hands were covered in blood. He just raised his hand and pointed to the door, telling me to leave. I couldn't move. I had too much fear. I was paralyzed. He considered that I was still provoking him, so when I didn't move, he moved for me. Suddenly, he started to move his legs quickly in my direction. After a few thousandths of a second, he was already running at high speed. This made me react, and I also ran as fast as I could. I don't know at what point he stopped, but when I turned around, he was no longer chasing me. I didn't stop running until I reached the main road. A truck driver picked me up, said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. Well, I had. When I tried to explain what had happened, he just shook his head and told me to get some rest. The police didn't find anything when they checked the house. No scratches, no broken windows, no sign of Stanley. They said I must have imagined it, that maybe I'd had too much to drink. But I know what I saw, and I know I'll never go back to that Airbnb. Stanley's still there, waiting for his next guest. Maybe he really is a friendly ghost. But that doesn't mean you can disrespect him. And I learned that the hard way. I never thought a late-night craving would turn into the most terrifying experience of my life. I'm usually cautious when heading out after dark, but that night, my hunger got the better of me. Little did I know, my decision to grab food would lead to a close encounter with something or someone, straight out of a nightmare. It was around 2 a.m. when I decided to go to the nearby 24-hour Burger King. The streets were quiet, and I told myself I'd be in and out in no time. I parked my car in the half-empty lot and walked inside. The familiar smell of fries and burgers greeted me as I approached the counter. After a brief exchange with an employee I recognized, I placed my order. Everything seemed normal, just another routine pit stop for fast food. I wasn't prepared for what would happen next. I picked up my meal and was heading back to my car when I noticed something unusual. A black SUV was parked directly in front of me, its engine running, but the headlights were off. What caught my attention even more was the silhouette inside. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat, completely still, their head tilted slightly toward me. I couldn't make out any of their features in the dim light, but the way they stared sent shivers down my spine. I told myself I was overreacting and climbed into my car. As I shut the door, I glanced at the SUV again. This time, I could see his eyes. They were wide, unblinking, and fixed directly on me. My stomach twisted. Before I could even start my engine, a loud thud startled me. It came from inside the SUV. The figure's gaze disappeared as they turned to face something in the back seat. Curiosity got the better of me, and I cracked my window to get a better look. The noises stopped abruptly. Then, the back door of the SUV flew open. Out stepped a man. No, more like a beast of a man, towering, muscular, and seething with rage. He staggered out as if disoriented, looked around wildly, and then let out a scream that could wake the dead. The sound was guttural and full of fury, the kind of scream you feel in your chest. I froze. Gripping my phone, I started recording a voice message for the friend who worked inside. I told him about the man and asked him to call security. As I hit send, I glanced up to see the man climb onto the roof of the SUV. He stood there, chest heaving, his head snapping in every direction like an animal searching for prey. Then his eyes locked onto mine. My heart stopped. He roared and jumped down, landing with a thud that echoed through the lot. Without hesitation, he charged at my car. I turned the key in the ignition, but my car sputtered and refused to start. Panic surged through me as he closed the distance. I twisted the key again, praying it would work this time. Finally, the engine roared to life. I slammed on the gas just as he reached my car. There was a loud bang on the roof as I sped away. I didn't stop driving until I was home. My driveway felt like a sanctuary as I pulled in and turned off the engine. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I grabbed my phone to check the message I'd sent earlier. My friend had replied, and his voice was frantic. "Get out now! A guard saw you leaving. The guy, he isn't in the lot anymore. He's on top of your—" Before he could finish, a hand shot through my open window and grabbed me by my neck. The phone fell from my hand as I was yanked halfway out of the car. The man's grip was like iron, and his eyes burned with an unhinged intensity. He pulled me out completely and threw me to the ground with terrifying strength. I scrambled backward on the pavement, my palms scraping against the rough surface. He stalked toward me, his movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. My mind raced for a way out, but I was paralyzed with fear. He raised his fist, and I braced for the worst. Out of nowhere, headlights flooded the scene. A car screeched to a halt, and 3 young men jumped out. They ran toward us, shouting at the man to back off. For a moment, I thought they'd scare him away, but he didn't even flinch. Instead, he grabbed one of them by the arm, twisted it with inhuman strength, and tossed him aside like a rag doll. The other 2 tried to tackle him, but he threw them off with ease. The distraction gave me a chance to crawl toward my car, but my legs felt like jelly. The man turned back to me, his face contorted with rage. He was shaking, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Just as he lunged, I remembered the taser in my bag. My hands fumbled as I pulled it out, but adrenaline gave me the speed I needed. As he closed the gap, I pressed the taser to his side and fired. He convulsed and collapsed to the ground. I didn't stick around to see if he'd stay down. I grabbed my key, stumbled into my house, and locked the door behind me. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely dial 911. Through the window, I could see the 3 men getting back into their car. One of them was on his phone, probably calling for help too. The man outside, though, he wasn't finished. He got up, slamming his fist against my door, shouting incoherently. The sound was deafening, each blow threatening to break the door down. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, flashing blue and red lights appeared at the end of my street. The police arrived and subdued him after a struggle. Later, I learned that the SUV wasn't registered to him or anyone nearby. The police couldn't identify him, and he was eventually sent to a psychiatric facility. As for me, I've learned my lesson. I still get late-night cravings, but I'll never let my guard down again. And if I ever see someone acting strange, I won't stick around to find out why.
I had been driving for hours. The road was dead straight, empty, and black. My hands were tight on the wheel. The GPS said 2 more hours to go, and my stomach felt like it was eating itself. No gas stations, no houses, nothing. Then a red glow appeared ahead. At first I thought it was just another random billboard, but as I got closer I saw the smiling red-haired face on the sign. A Wendy's. I slowed down. It didn't make sense. A Wendy's in the middle of nowhere. But I didn't care. I was starving. I pulled into the parking lot. Only one pickup parked near the entrance. The lights inside flickered weakly like they were about to die. The sign outside buzzed with a low electric hum. When I stepped out of the car, the night felt too quiet. No wind, no cars, just the buzzing sign. I walked toward the door and pushed it open. The smell hit me first. It wasn't rotten, but it was stale, like old grease and wet mop water that never really dried. The floor had stains that didn't look recent, and a few tables were out of place. There was only one guy behind the counter, bald. His head had thick veins bulging against the skin, and they pulsed as he breathed. His uniform looked dusty, like it had been hanging in a closet for years. He just stared at me without moving. I stepped up to the counter. He turned slowly, walked to the kitchen, and grabbed a raw patty. His hands trembled when he dropped it on the grill. The flames jumped and he flinched hard, pulling his arms back like they'd burned him. I watched him from the counter. He kept glancing at the fire like it was alive. His breathing got louder and faster. His whole body twitched like he was forcing himself to keep going. He wrapped the burger fast, like he couldn't stand touching it. When he came back, his hands were shaking worse. His veins looked darker, swollen. He didn't move right, like something inside him was twisting around. He stopped in front of the counter, staring at nothing. His chest rose and fell too fast. Then he slammed his hands down on the counter and came around it. His movements weren't smooth. They were jerky, like his body wasn't fully under control. He grabbed me by the shirt and shoved me against the wall. His grip was strong and cold. His face was inches from mine. His breath smelled like grease and something burned deep underneath it. His eyes didn't focus on me. They stared at something behind me, something I couldn't see. His jaw locked. His body shook. His breath came out in short bursts. I could feel the heat of his skin against mine, but his hands were ice cold. He kept holding me for a few seconds, breathing hard. Then his arms went limp and he backed away like he'd forgotten what he was doing. His eyes flicked the door, then back to me. "You need to leave, right now! It's starting, again! This place will be on fire soon!" I moved toward the exit. I needed to get out of there. That man was completely insane. Right before I stepped outside, his hand landed on my shoulder. His grip was stiff, like he was forcing it. I turned. His face was pale, stretched, his lips trembling. He held out the wrapped burger toward me. His eyes were locked on mine. I didn't want it, but I took it. He didn't move after that. I walked fast to my car, threw the burger in the passenger seat, and started the engine. My hands were shaking. I didn't even look back. The first scream came as I shifted into drive. It was loud and sharp, tearing through the night. It froze me for a second. Then another scream, louder. I turned my head. He was standing at the entrance of the Wendy's. His body was shaking violently. His hands were on his face. His voice was raw, broken. "It's burning again! It's burning! It won't stop! It's eating me alive! The heat is inside my skin! It's peeling off! It's melting!" He dropped to his knees, screaming louder. "It's on my face! It's on my face! I can feel it sliding off! I can't breathe! It's in my mouth! It's burning my tongue! My eyes, they're gone! I can't see! I can't see!" He clawed at his own face, screaming like something was tearing him apart from the inside. The building behind him stayed dark and still. No fire, no smoke, just him. I hit the gas and drove away. 3 kilometers down, another Wendy's appeared. Bright lights, clean windows, a parking lot full of cars. It looked new, normal. I stepped inside. It smelled like fresh fries and disinfectant. There were several employees behind the counter. None of them looked like him. I told them what I saw, the empty building, the bald guy, the screams. They stared at me like I was talking about something that shouldn't exist. One of them said the old Wendy's burned down years ago. One worker didn't make it out. He screamed until the roof collapsed. Everyone who worked there that night remembered his voice. I didn't say anything else. I left. I drove back down the hallway. No sign, no flickering lights, no building, just the burned foundation of a place that had died a long time ago. Black concrete, melted steel, weeds creeping out of the cracks. I got out of the car. No humming, no sound at all. The air was still. The smell of ash clung to the ground, faint, but real. I got back in the car. That's when I saw it. On the passenger seat, the burger. The bun was cracked and dry. The meat inside was black, slimy, and reeked like rotting flesh. I opened the window and threw it out. It hit the ground with a heavy, wet slap. I slammed the gas pedal and didn't look back. I never drove down that highway again.
My name is Craig, and I never thought selling knives online could put my life and my family in danger. I was just a small seller on Amazon, moving boxes of kitchen knives from a supplier to customers who wanted something affordable. It was routine, boring, and safe, or at least I believed it was. Most buyers left no feedback at all, and the few that did usually mentioned shipping times or packaging quality. I thought the worst problem I would ever face was a lost package or a return request. Things changed when I received a review unlike any I had seen before. It wasn't about customer service or the sharpness of the blade for cooking. The buyer complained that the knife bent when he tested it on thicker material. The wording was cold, calculated, and far too specific. His username was cut deep enough, and something about it froze me. He didn't ask for a replacement, didn't even want a refund. He just stated that the knife failed and he would be in touch. At first, I tried to dismiss it as some twisted joke, but then I started noticing little changes around my home. Packages delivered to my porch were cut open and resealed, not stolen, just violated. The seams of the cardboard were cleanly sliced, not torn by hand. My wife Claire thought it was porch pirates trying to scare us off, but nothing was missing. It wasn't theft, it was a warning. The silence of those nights made me restless. I heard gravel crunch outside my window, heavy steps that stopped and stayed for too long. When I opened the blinds, there was never anyone there. I wanted to believe I was imagining it. Deep down, I knew I wasn't. The real message arrived in a package that wasn't from Amazon. There was no return label, no tape from a warehouse, just a plain box left directly on my porch. Inside was one of the very knives I had shipped weeks earlier, but this was no longer clean. The blade was bent and the metal stained with something dark that had dried into thick streaks. The wooden handle was cracked, like it had been smashed against something unyielding. Alongside it was a note written in rushed, blocky handwriting. It read, "Not deep enough. Refund not accepted. Talking soon." I kept that knife hidden in the garage, unable to throw it away, but terrified of leaving it in the house. Claire asked about the box, but I lied, saying it was a return. I could feel something spiraling out of control, and admitting it out loud would make it real. The next few nights were worse. Our dog barked at the same corner of the yard until it lost its voice, and every time I stepped outside, I felt watched. I began locking every door twice, keeping lights on in every room, but none of it mattered. The fear wasn't outside anymore. It had followed me into every corner of the house. When I checked my Amazon seller account, I found a new message. Short, blunt, and terrifying in its simplicity. Face to face, soon. It happened on a Wednesday night. Claire was upstairs folding laundry while I finished some shipping labels in the kitchen. A knock rattled the front door, so forceful it shook the frame. It wasn't the polite tap of a visitor. It was the pounding of someone who already owned the space they were demanding to enter. Before I could react, a voice seeped through the wood. Calm, steady, and chillingly deliberate. "I want a refund." I froze in place. My legs wanted to move, but fear weighed them down. Claire shouted from upstairs asking who it was, but I couldn't answer. I inched toward the door and glanced through the side window. That's when I saw him. He was standing perfectly still, holding one of my knives. His face was stretched into a grin too wide to be genuine. His eyes opened too far, unblinking, scanning the house like he had been living in it already. He tapped the blade against his thigh with a rhythm, like a metronome counting down. I shut the blinds in panic, but the pounding grew louder. Then, silence. For one brief second I thought maybe he left. The sound of shattering glass ripped that thought away as the kitchen window exploded inward. He climbed through with terrifying speed, landing on the floor like he had rehearsed it. Claire screamed from the stairs, but he reached her before I could. His hand shot around her throat, pulling her down the steps with brutal control. The dull blade pressed against her face, dragging just enough to leave a faint line without drawing blood. He smiled, his teeth clenched tight as if the grin was locked in place. "This is what you sell? This toy? I used it, and it failed. It bent. Do you know what happens when tools fail? People lose faith. People die sloppy. You ruined efficiency." His voice rose and fell without logic, swinging between calm explanations and sudden shouts. Every word came out like a performance for an audience only he could see. Claire struggled, gasping for air, while I collapsed to my knees, begging him to stop. He dragged her closer to me, crouching so we were all at eye level. His expression twisted from amusement to rage in an instant. Look at her. Look at your product. If this knife had been made correctly, she would already be silent. But no. It bends. It resists. Do you understand what you cost me? He pressed the blade harder against her cheek, and her eyes filled with tears. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. All I could do was plead, promising money, begging for her life. He didn't flinch. The tension inside the room was unbearable, like every second was balanced on the edge of the blade against her skin. He tilted his head, staring at me with eyes that didn't blink, and then he began laughing. It wasn't joy or humor. It was the cackling of someone who found amusement in destruction. You sell lies. You sit in this house with your little business and your neat packaging, but you have no idea what your tools are used for. I used them. I tested them. They failed. And now you fail. He shoved Claire into my arms, only to slam his boot into my ribs before I could catch her properly. Pain shot through me as I collapsed, coughing and choking on my breath. He crouched beside me, grabbed the envelope of cash I kept in the drawer, and spread it out like he was grading an assignment. Pathetic. You think money fixes failure? You think bills can sharpen a dull edge? No. Money is meaningless without reliability. Refund means acknowledgement. Refund means apology. You don't even understand your own business. His voice cracked into a scream as he waved the knife inches from my face. Claire sobbed behind me, and I couldn't shield her. My entire body shook as he pocketed half the cash, leaving the rest scattered on the floor. I'll take the refund. I'll take travel expenses, but I'll also take your reputation. The world will know this knife is worthless. He spat on the floor and kicked me again, leaving me curled on the ground, gasping for air. His last words echoed like a death sentence. 1 star! And then he was gone, walking out the back door as if he owned it. Minutes passed before I could move. Claire clung to me, shaking violently, her face streaked with tears. My rib burned every time I breathed, but I forced myself to crawl to the phone and dial the police. When the officers arrived, their flashlights cut across the house, shining on broken glass and scattered bills, but there was no trace of him outside. I gave them everything I could remember, his height, his face, his words, but the way they looked at me made it clear they didn't understand. To them, it was a home invasion, maybe a burglary gone wrong. They didn't understand the performance, the obsession, the reason behind his visit. After they left, I returned to the kitchen. My laptop was open on the table. I hadn't left it that way. My Amazon seller account was on the screen, and a new review had been posted. It was 1 star. Product bends, doesn't cut deep enough, seller incompetent, avoid at all costs. It has been 2 weeks since he invaded my home. Claire barely sleeps, and when she does, she wakes up screaming. I haven't closed my eyes without seeing his grin, his eyes, the way he held the knife like it was more important than our lives. I've suspended my Amazon account, and we don't live in that house anymore. We don't even go near that place, and we never will. This story is based on the case of Todd Kohlhepp, a serial killer and sex offender known for using his Amazon account to leave sinister and disturbing reviews on products he purchased, many of which were related to his crimes. In 2016, police arrested him after discovering a woman chained in a metal container on his property in South Carolina. Upon investigation, it was revealed that Kohlhepp had murdered 7 people between 2003 and 2016. He appeared to be a successful man. He worked as a real estate agent and had a degree in business. However, he had a criminal record dating back to his youth for sexual assault. He was sentenced to 7 life sentences without the possibility of parole.
My name is Claire. I was 12 when it happened. My brother Ethan was just 10 months old. That night was supposed to be normal. Mom and Dad had a party downtown. They didn't want to leave us alone, so they hired Madison. Madison was everything parents liked. Smiling, polite, always saying the right thing. My parents trusted her. After 5 minutes, they said goodnight, kissed Ethan, waved at me goodbye, and left. The door clicked shut. I sat on the couch half watching a cartoon. Madison cleaned the kitchen, humming softly. Every once in a while, she would glance at me with a look that didn't match her smile. It was too long, too sharp. The first hour was fine. Madison made popcorn, let me stay up past my bedtime, even gave me soda. It was weird, but I wasn't going to complain. Around 9, Ethan started crying. Madison picked him up and rocked him while whispering things I couldn't hear. She stared at him like she was studying him, not comforting him. I tried to brush it off, but something about the way she held him, too tight, too stiff, made my stomach twist. She carried him upstairs without saying a word. The house got quiet, too quiet. I muted the TV and listened. No talking, no singing, just a faint creak of footsteps upstairs, back and forth, like she was pacing. I stayed downstairs for a while, trying to pretend everything was fine, but the creaking didn't stop. I decided to check on Ethan. Walking upstairs felt wrong, like every step was pushing me closer to something I shouldn't see. I moved slow, keeping my hand tight on the railing. At the top, I heard it, slurping, wet, greedy sounds coming from the hallway. My skin prickled. I crept forward, past the bathroom, past my room, until I reached the nursery door. It was open just a crack. I looked inside. Madison was feeding Ethan. She was crouched by the mini fridge we kept upstairs for his milk. One of the bottles was in her hand. She ripped the top off and started chugging it. It spilled down her chin, her neck, soaking her blouse. She didn't care. Her eyes were rolled back, her hand squeezing the bottle so hard it bent. I froze. I didn't know what I was seeing. I took a step back, and the floorboard creaked under my foot. Madison's head snapped towards me, milk dripping from her chin. Her mouth was twisted into a smile that didn't look human. She stood up slowly, still holding the half-empty bottle. Her fingers left deep dents in the plastic. I wanted to run, but my legs didn't move fast enough. She grabbed me by the wrist and yanked me into the room. I stumbled over a toy truck and hit the floor hard. Ethan started wailing in his crib. Madison shoved the bottle at my face. "Drink it." I turned my head, but she forced the bottle against my mouth. Milk spilled all over me, dripping down my throat. It was warm and sour. I gagged and pushed her arm away. She dropped the bottle and grabbed my hair. "You need to love it like I do. Come on, love it, or I'll kill you." I scratched at her arm and kicked her in her shins, but she didn't flinch. Her strength didn't make sense. I managed to slip free for a second and bolted out the nursery, slipping onto the milk puddle. She was right behind me. Her feet thudded heavy on the carpet as she chased me down the hall. I didn't think. I ran for the stairs, half falling, grabbing into the railing to keep me from breaking my neck. Madison laughed behind me, short and sharp. I hit the living room and sprinted to the front door. Madison tackled me halfway across the room. We crashed onto the coffee table. Pain shot up to my ribs. She pinned me down, her face inches from mine. Her breath stank of old milk. She whispered things I didn't understand, words that didn't even sound like English. I kneed her stomach and rolled away. She grabbed my ankle, her nails digging into my skin. But I kicked free and I scrambled to my feet. Without knowing, I ran outside, barefoot, cold gravel cutting into my feet. But I didn't care. Madison followed, stumbling, her blouse soaked and clinging onto her like a second skin. The neighbors were outside, walking their dog. They stopped when they saw us. Madison lunged at me again, but Mr. Grant, the neighbor, stepped between us. He grabbed Madison's arm. She trashed and screamed, foaming at the mouth. Mrs. Grant picked me up and pulled me to their porch. Mr. Grant wrestled Madison to the ground. She bit and scratched, trying to break free. Her screams didn't sound like a person anymore. They sounded like something else. The police arrived faster than I expected. Flashing lights filled the street. Madison didn't even fight when they cuffed her. She just smiled, milk dropping from her chin, eyes wide and empty. I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket. Ethan was safe, still crying but untouched. Mom and Dad arrived minutes later, faces white with panic. The police didn't explain much. They just said Madison was being taken somewhere secure. I heard words like obsessive behavior and psychotic break. I didn't care. I just wanted her gone. They told me later that Madison had been fired from her last job for stealing milk from a family's fridge. She had a record, but nothing serious enough to stop her from working again. Until now. We moved a month later. New house, new city. Mom and Dad still blame themselves. I don't. They couldn't have known. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they smile, say please and thank you, and act like the perfect babysitter. Until the night that they show you who they really are. I still can't drink milk without wanting to puke. And I don't trust anyone who smiles too much.
I moved to Sacramento because I had nowhere else to go. After getting fired from my job in Reno, I took whatever I could find. Ended up sleeping in a little apartment behind a liquor store. Working nights loading crates at a warehouse near Arden Way. I didn't talk to anyone. Didn't want to. I just needed to make it through the month. Most nights after work, I'd walk a few blocks to clear my head. I'd stay in the quieter areas. Places where cops didn't patrol unless they had to. That's how I found Eleanor Avenue. Just a street like any other. Quiet, empty, but the houses were weird, like people had left without packing. I passed a place near the corner, number 3241. Its front door was wide open, swinging slightly like someone had kicked it in or forgotten. The porch light was on, but no one was around. I almost kept walking. Then I saw something inside, a shape on the floor, like someone had collapsed. I stopped and stared. No movement, no sound. I stepped to the door slowly. The shape wasn't moving. From where I stood, it looked like a woman. Her arms were at strange angles. Her clothes were stained. I didn't think about calling the cops. I walked inside, and from that moment on, everything went to hell. The woman was dead. Her skin had that dry look. It had been there sitting for too long. Her jaw hung open, eyes wide. I stared for too long. I know that now. But something upstairs snapped me out of it. A footstep, then another. At first, I thought someone else had found the body and was calling for help. But whoever was up there wasn't moving like that. He walked slow, steady, one step at a time, pacing like they were thinking. I didn't call out. I just listened, breathing through my teeth, frozen in place. The stairs creaked. Whatever was up there knew I was down here. There was a pause. Then I heard a voice, not loud, almost like they were talking to itself.
Not again. My blood. So dirty. So dirty.
The voice didn't sound angry. It sounded scared. But there was something off. Too calm. Too quiet. I stepped back towards the door, but it slammed shut on its own. Not all the way, just enough to hear the click. I turned and I saw him. He looked sick, pale, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in weeks. His clothes were stained, old. He held a knife like it wasn't a weapon, like it was just a part of him. And he smiled. Not a grin, just the kind of smile that people give to you when they don't understand what's happening. Hey man, you okay? Did the man that did this escape?
You're poisoned too. They're playing with you, manipulating you. But it doesn't work on me anymore.
I didn't speak. I didn't move. He tilted his head like a dog trying to read your thoughts. Then he started walking down the stairs, one slow step at a time. I backed away until I bumped into the dead woman's legs. He saw that and stopped mid-step.
I tried to help her. She bled wrong. It smelled like plastic.
That's when I realized he was the one who did this. So I bolted. I pushed past the body, ran towards the back of the house, but everything was blocked. Furniture stacked to the ceiling, closets nailed shut. The back door was chained. I could hear his bare feet slapping the stairs behind me. I ran to the kitchen, opened every drawer looking for anything that I could use to defend myself. The only thing I found was a broken chair leg. I grabbed it and I turned around just in time to see him walking through the doorway, still smiling. He walked like he had all the time in the world. I swung the chair leg, hit his shoulder hard, but he didn't even flinch. He muttered something about his blood being different now, that they couldn't track him anymore, that he had finally sealed the entry points. He came at me with a knife, not fast, just steady. I dodged and knocked over a table, grabbed a glass and smashed it against his head. He blinked, but he didn't stop. Blood dripped from his cheek, and he laughed.
It's not mine. It's theirs. I'm clean inside. I need this blood. You do understand, right?
I ducked under his arm and ran back to the front. Tried the door, still locked. I turned around and he was already standing there, like he hadn't moved, just appeared. His chest rose and felt like he was breathing through a straw.
You smell like copper. They did something to your brain.
I charged at him, hit him hard in the ribs. We both went down. He dropped the knife and I kicked it away, but he grabbed my leg and bit down on my calf hard. I screamed and punched him in the temple until he let go. I crawled towards the door, dragging my leg, but he got up slowly, wiped his mouth with his sleeve. He looked almost sad, like I had betrayed him. The moment stretched. He wasn't chasing me now, just watching, breathing hard, mumbling things I couldn't understand. I dragged myself up and ran upstairs. It was a mistake, but I needed distance. I needed a way out. Every door up there was sealed except one, a bedroom. I went inside and slammed it shut behind me, pushed the desk in front of it. The room was disgusting, the bed soaked in old blood. The walls covered in paper, scribbles, drawings, newspaper clippings, all about blood, organs, diagrams of veins. I looked out the window, too high to jump. The streets below were empty, no cars, no lights. Then I heard him outside the door.
You are like them. You are like them. You filthy liar. I will feast in your dirty blood.
The door shuddered. He started slamming his body against it. I searched the room for something, anything. Found a metal lamp, unplugged it and held it like a bat. The desk cracked. His hand reached in first, then the knife. I hit him in the wrist. He screamed, pulled back. Blood sprayed the wall, but he didn't fall. I grabbed one of the wooden slats from the broken bed frame and jammed it through the door, just enough to edge it shut, for now. I couldn't stay. I opened the closet and found a crawl space, dark, narrow. It led into the attic. I pulled myself inside, dragging my bleeding leg, and started crawling. Behind me, I heard the bedroom door splinter. The crawl space was tight. My leg was useless. I could hear him downstairs now, talking to himself, to someone who wasn't there. The house creaked with every step he took. He was talking about hearts, about needing a clean one. I searched the attic and found a small hatch, pushed it open and saw the roof. Cold wind hit my face. I crawled out and stood up, shaky. The street below looked closer. I lowered myself as far as I could and I dropped. I landed hard. My ankle cracked, but I didn't stop. I limped to the nearest house and banged on the door. No one answered. I kept going until I saw headlights. A pickup truck stopped and the guy inside took one look at me and called the cops. They found 4 bodies in that house, all different rooms. Some had been drained of blood. One had her organs missing. The man inside, Richard Chase, was arrested the next day. He didn't resist. He told them he was trying to protect people from them. He never thought he was doing anything wrong. He thought he was saving people. The papers called him the Vampire of Sacramento. Said he drank blood to keep his heart from shrinking. Said he believed Nazis were turning his stomach to dust while manipulating other people's minds. The story is based on Richard Trenton Chase, known as the Vampire of Sacramento. He was an American serial killer who carried out a series of grotesque and violent murders. In California during the 1970s, over the course of just a few weeks, he killed 6 people, including children, in crimes marked by extreme brutality. His acts went far beyond simple homicide. He mutilated bodies, performed necrophilic acts, removed organs, and drank his victims' blood. One of his most disturbing crimes involved the murder of a pregnant woman, whose body he desecrated in ways that horrified even seasoned investigators. Chase believed that his own blood was turning to dust, and that he was dying unless he ingested fresh blood to replenish it. He developed a delusional system in which drinking blood, animal and human, was the way to survive. This belief wasn't just a twisted fantasy, it was his reality, and it dictated his every move. He thought people were poisoning him through the walls and manipulating him with secret rays. He saw blood consumption as a form of self-medication. In his mind, each kill was a medical necessity, not a choice.